history's a book written by the winner. And so once you understand that, you go, oh, so they're telling you a history that sets up how they want you to be. Frantz Fanon says the best colonizers always left behind the churches and the schools so that they could socialize the oppressed to the oppressor's point of view. And that one good priest could do the work of 100 soldiers. So the thing is, you got to learn to read, but then you got to read to learn. And when you really start to read your own books and you read the biography of Malcolm and you read the history of Ethiopia and you understand how they beat back the Italians and were never colonized. We don't learn about that history. My daddy used to say, history's a book written.
Greetings, good everything. Hi.
Good everything. Good everything. Good morning, good afternoon, evening, Professor Hunter.
Yeah.
We're not on Windows, so we're okay, right? Everybody can see it.
Was it Windows?
Well, what did you say yesterday?
I think it's a trial run. I think we're very vulnerable as a nation, especially technology wise. We have way too many octogenarians in Congress who have no idea what to regulate, what to legislate, how the ticky-tock even works. They don't know anything, but they sit on these committees, which is why you have to elect people that know what the hell is going on. That's our responsibility. But yeah, I think we're very vulnerable. There's been too many data breaches and so close to the election. How you going to shut down the airports? Everybody but Spirit, which I think is still on the previous version of Windows.
Southwest had jokes. Y'all want to clown us for having one server in Northern Virginia, but how you feel now? No delays in Southwest. Right?
Who knew Spirit would be the one that comes out a winner?
Well,
so yeah.
We saw they made a bid for Spirit about a month ago.
JetBlue.
Yeah, they're gonna maybe they were just prepping.
Yeah, I had Roy Wood was on yesterday, Roy Wood Jr., and he was stuck in the airport, but he had his whole setup. That man is ready. He said, I got my Roland Martin on. I got my camera, my lights. He found a little corner in the airport, one of these abandoned little areas, and set up shop.
It's hilarious because you're absolutely right. It's so funny he cracked that joke because there's truth in it. Roland travels with, if there's electricity, he will not be. He got all kind of cameras and he never lets anybody touch his bag. He's like, we're going to see. No, that's going on the plane with me because I can broadcast from the plane if I need to.
Yeah. I was actually looking for another because I've been collecting all of these little clips for my radio show, and there was one about the gladiator games, and I started watching this TV show this on Peacock.
Which one is it?
I can find it. Starring Anthony Hopkins. And God dog it, now I don't have it up. Okay, here we go. Nope, I don't have it.
Take your time.
Yeah. And then there's a little feedback, which I don't know what that is. But
it might be this microphone again. I keep it too close to the computer.
Okay.
Let's try. Maybe is that better?
Yeah, there we go. Those About to Die. It's a TV show based on the book by Daniel Mannix, who wrote the Gladiator that Ridley Scott turned into Gladiator with Russell Crowe. So it's
and the new and Gladiator 2 is coming out with
Denzel.
Yeah, but Denzel is playing. He was cast as Hannibal in another. This is not that film.
I don't.
It was reported in Variety last December that Anton Fuqua is doing a film for Netflix and on Hannibal, and Denzel Washington is playing the lead. They weren't too happy in parts of Tunisia. I will assume that's the non-African parts. And I'm talking about not being continental Africans. All Tunisians are Africans. I'm talking about the non-black Tunisians. They weren't very happy about that. But I was wondering whether or not this Gladiator 2 was part of a larger strategy. Let me get you easier to see me in Rome, and then I'm going to go to what I really want to do. So I don't know. Well, yeah, they're part of
Those About to Die, and again, there's still some feedback. Those About to Die is that in the first episode, they end up in Africa to capture this white lion. I'm not going to give away too much, but
that's all right. I mean, spoiler alert. I don't care nothing about no. If they going to Africa,
well, it's not for you. I know you're not going to watch it. It's the other people, Dr. Carr.
I might watch it, but it won't alert. It won't spoil me. The narrative won't spoil me because they mess up Africa all the time. I would expect them to mess it up. They're there for a white lion, huh?
Right. For a white lion. And it's like, it looks like some Maasai warriors, because they, Maasai warriors are known for lion hunting. And
these are Romans.
so the Romans have the Africans. They come into Africa to get the animals for the gladiator games, right?
In the East Africa, I'm assuming. Because I don't know that there are lions in North Africa, but anyway, that's what I'm saying. It can't mess me up. It don't matter. Anyway,
we are obviously suspending our
yeah, which is a good thing to do in this season of Republican National Convention. Suspend all facts. So,
right. So this whole notion of bread and circus came up, and so I was like, wow. And in this time, and it says 55, around 55 CE, and I was like, is that AD or BC? And then it's like common error. And then I was like, so I was going through my thing. I was like, because that sends me on searches. So I was like, so 55 years after the death of Christ. So number one, the Romans weren't Christians per se till they became Christians for political reasons. But then they changed the calendar in all time based on Christ's death and birth. So BC is before Christ, and AD is after the year our Lord, or after the death.
I know Dominique. I know meaning year. Dominique, live our Lord.
The Lord, right? And then there's CE, common error.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but I find it interesting because I know Africans kept time. So I was like,
everybody kept time.
Right. So I'm like, when did this happen? And if it only took 55 years, because we're in a particular time in history. And I was like, what else is going to shift that, thousands of years from now, they're going to mark this time. And then we're going to be, the people who will be here, will be entrenched or engrossed or, indelibly marked with this time, this period, because we are really with the ability to mess with the grid, with the ability to shut down all things like Paramount did, like erase history. Anything that's digital can be erased with the flick of a switch or a button pushed. And I'm like, wow, the Romans did that without technology. How powerful. And I just wanted to ask you, first of all, what was time called before it was CE and BC and AD and BCE? What was time in Africa before these Romans decided? And as it was a distraction, by the way, all the gladiator games. So I was looking actually for a video, and I found Mario Van Peebles, and I was like, this is interesting. But there was a video about how during this period of time, it was a lot of turmoil. The Roman Empire was on its way out. So they fed the people grain, some of them, because there was still a lot of starvation. But the gladiator games became the ultimate distraction from the turmoil, chaos, and complete, decimation of the Roman Empire. And I was like, yeah, the Republican National Convention looked like a WWE inspired production.
Hulkamania
with Hulk Hogan. And the bandages. And, yes. Brother.
I mean, I had to go doing a little digging. We talked about it yesterday morning, Lamont and I. Hulk Hogan, at least one strain of his family is Panamanian, but the rest of them is white, Irish, and so when he starts talking about let's count real Americans one by one, I'm like, no problem. Let's start with you, friend. As a person who came here as an immigrant, part of a family of the community who was
nobody's going to talk about Melania or Ivana.
I don't think Melania is going to talk about Melania. You say, miss me with that kiss, huh, Melania? But she liked 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, so she'll come gliding back in there with that stone face and tear up all the flowers and plant that Soviet style grass like she did last time.
Isn't she an immigrant?
Everybody immigrant except the indigenous people, except you and I didn't. In fact, we didn't ask to be here. I much preferred to stay at home. But brother, I understand. I embrace Hulk Hogan. Let's dance, baby, with your spray tan on. You and Donald Trump should have had a spray tan off right there on the stage. You've got a stage full of circus clowns, starting with Negro Night, the first night of the convention, with the Tim Scott up there, wow, and all that. Mark Robinson, Mr. Bowling Ball, saying that some people need to be killed. Not that night, but a little too close. And all them hillbillies sitting up in there with pieces of white paper patched to their ear, which is just, it was a beautiful spectacle. Beautiful spectacle. So they should have finished strong. It dug Tucker Carlson out of his great replacement theory cave. I guess Steve Bannon is temporarily unavailable. Although Peter Navarro is out of jail, I'm sure he'll get a pardon coming up. Rudy Giuliani stumbled in, literally. I mean, it was quite entertaining. You know what I'm saying? And then Amber Rose comes busting up as if anyone in the Black community, I'll use that for her, would listen to what she says. Although, did you see? And I wonder, you think it was AI or some artificially generated clips that were floating around that showed Van Jones, Mr. Weeper, trailing behind her and going into the RNC after party? I saw them going up the stairs with security. Somebody in Nubia probably saw it. I don't know if you saw it. Just very quick clips in Milwaukee of Mr. Jones trailing behind her, but then he's been known to chase wayward folks who made their living off of social media. So, but anyway, it was quite a spectacle. It's quite entertaining.
Bread and circus.
Bread and circus. Yes. Panem. So, bread. Panis, really, from the Latin. So Panera. Bread and circus.
Right. Panera bread is redundant.
Panera bread is redundant. Isn't that something? We just be out here.
That's my point. You know.
We just be out here.
Most of us don't even think about these things, though.
No.
It's like, but we need to, though, Dr. Carr. We need to start thinking.
Do we, though? Do we?
Yes.
Or in doing it, will we be missing the point?
What's the point?
The point is power. I mean, J.D. Vance, I don't know if you saw after I got back last night from sitting and watching Dionne Warwick be Dionne Warwick, which was...
Wait, you were out in the streets? Dr. Carr was out in the streets?
Just for a couple of hours. I literally timed it so that I got there like 1 minute before the show started and stopped, of course, by the table. Because, you know, most of those concerts, especially like that, and at 59, it was kind of striking to think I might have been the youngest person there. Some of y'all bring y'all children to see these divas and legends before they make transition. Could you, you know, I was like, my God, where the young... But I stopped by the table. Shout out to David, who is when she goes on tour, he's one of the people who kind of make sure that there's merchandise because she signs things before. And so, you know, I've got both the memoirs that she wrote, but I didn't have a signed copy of My Life as I see it before yesterday.
Let me see.
Right. Just a quick Dionne on My Life as I see it. You know, I got the hardback, but you know, I stopped. Hey man, he said, well, she hasn't signed any yet. So I said, well, I'll be back after the show. He said, okay, because she usually signs a few. And then he said, I'll put one under the table for you. No problem, man. So I think I was almost the last one to leave out there last night. I sat there and talked to people, saw some Nubians, saw some folk who are loyal Karen Hunter listeners on Sirius. It was a beautiful thing. The president of Bowie State University, her husband was there. Shout out to Dr. Browen. I apologize to her because we're poaching one of her faculty members, but that's my child. I got to have Shanice Thompson over there. Yeah. Where I am. She starts next month. But anyway, so it was maybe like one or two other people left in the place. He was packing up. And I said, he said, it is right here. Thank you, brother.
So did she walk on by, Dr. Carr?
Oh, she walked on by, sent a message to Michael, told us about the look of love. She then took a little saunter past she can't do most of the hits. She said a little prayer, but she did it with her son.
Okay.
Her son is fascinating. In fact, if people didn't know her history, you wouldn't know this. But she said, you know, I had a young guy who was my drummer. And, you know, she was only married once and to that man twice, as we know, you know, Dionne Warwick's history.
I mean, the funny thing, they used to own the movie theater, the Ormont. I'm from East Orange.
That's right. Jersey, which she brought up.
She had the Ormont in New Jersey, and I went there for the opening, and her son was so cute because, you know, we were so excited because Damon, right? Is it Damon?
Damon is the young one. David is the one she sang with. Yeah, Damon is the young. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And so they were, you know, she had her sons there with the opening and her husband, and it was like, you know, big deal. Dionne Warwick, you know, with the Ormont Theater, which is where I think I saw the Fist that saved Pittsburgh there.
Dr. J, shout out. Pisces.
Yeah, glory.
All right, young people, if you haven't seen the Fist You Saved Pittsburgh, put that on your watch list. You saw it I think you mentioned that a couple of years ago.
I did, but I saw it at the Ormont.
But you didn't put the connection on Dionne Warwick.
Yes.
What?
That's wild. That's so wild.
Oh, she Jersey through and through, which is hilarious to me.
Yes.
You know, those East Coast roots are strong and East Coasters, because even people who think that Sheila Jackson Lee is from Texas. No, she from New York. She New Yorker.
Queens.
Queens, no question.
Jamaican roots. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Her mom, who was an Oakwood grad, which is something. But wow. Yeah. So David came out. They did say a little prayer for you together. And then his daughter, Cheyenne, who opened, she did 3 or 4 songs. And then Dionne is hilarious. She said that she didn't say this last night. She writes about this in an interview. She said, Sammy Davis Jr. told me, always make sure they introduce you before you come out. You want people. And she told him, she said, they know who I am. And so it was funny because the lights went down and you heard her voice off stage. She said, hello, it's me. This performer who's opening for me tonight has been singing with me since she's 9 years old. Please give a warm welcome applause. And then people didn't know that was her granddaughter. They just came out. She sang. Well, she was good. And then when she finished, she walked off, and Dionne just walked on. No announcement. And then, of course, everybody stood up. I mean, she told Sam Davis, "It's me. You ain't got to say my name. They here to see me." So,
Period. I love that.
Diva, man. She said she learned that walk, that style from her mom, from her family, from her auntie, who was almost like a cousin Sissy. And then it's kind of sad because in My Life as I See It, she has a chapter on passing the baton. She talks about all the women she studied. She would sit in the back and watch all these sisters, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan. And she would, and then she said one night she went to see Diane Carroll. She was very young, and she's sitting all the way in the back. Diane Carroll sent for her. It's like, little girl, what are you doing? She said, I'm taking notes. She brought a notebook to all these before, and she would just write down everything. She said, I'm studying y'all. And she told Diane Carroll, I'm studying you. And she said, bring that notebook. Let me see. And so she's reading through, and Diane Carroll said to her, you literally wrote down everything I did. She said, why? She said, because I want to learn from you. She said, no, you keep this up. You're going to go farther than me. And she said to the day, for the rest of their lives, she, because of course she wrote this app before Diane Carroll made transition. She said Diane Carroll referred to her as little girl. To that whole little girl, what are you doing with that? So I mean, but I'm only
just saying that. I'm also lamenting at the number of, like you said, bringing children to concerts. My parents taking me to see the last movie with Mom's Mabley. And the music discography in our home. We talked about Saturday mornings, like the ways of knowing gets passed down in these mundane routine things that we do, but also it's in the multi-generational collection. My grandmother sitting with me with Hank Aaron on a little earbud, me being introduced to Hank Aaron as a little girl that I wouldn't have had any connection to, but now every child has their own device and their own curated music and curated games and TV shows, and there's no longer families getting together to watch Good Times together or the Jeffersons. We all watched it together or watched the news together. So there's no multi-generational conversations. So when do we pass down, just like, being indoctrinated into a way of knowing it is so much easier in a society where we're so disjointed intra-family.
And that really is the unit of governance. When we talk about that governance category, those ways of knowing are deep. Family is community. Dionne Warwick had it on display last night. Family is community. And that's how you learn. And that's how you build a society. And it's interesting you said that like everybody's now individually centered in these devices. As I say, except yesterday, which was funny because they're usually 4 with her traveling band. A brother from Philly is on drums. A guy from San Diego is consistently her pianist, and the percussionist is from Brazil, where of course she lived for like 20 plus years. She loves Brazil. In fact, she performed last night. I was so happy she did. She said, this is the way this song should have been recorded, but we didn't know it then. So I'm going to do it the way that I did it with Celia Cruz. And she did, do you notice the way to San Jose with the samba? I'm like, see, this is the one they're going to say. I mean, again, because Dionne Warwick is a Pan-Africanist. I mean, she said, I fell in love. She said, I built a house in Bahia because they are African. They know they're African. It's no thing. And it's funny because last night it was a multiracial audience, as you can imagine. There were more white people than black people. The black people were the old heads, as you can imagine. And there was a lot, there's white people there. But her thing was she performed a song that she said, this young man, we were on tour, And he kept performing this song night after night. And finally I asked him, where'd you get that song? I love that song. He said, he just started laughing at her. And he said, you know that song? She said, no. She said, Hal David wrote the lyrics to that song. She said, that's impossible. Because everything Bert and Hal did, I got it first. He said, not this one. And she said that young man's name was Johnny Mathis. And then she sang this song, If I Want To. And she would say, I could build a new world if I want to. And then she, of course, did What the World Needs Now is Love, Sweet Love. And I'm sitting there thinking, you know, this is not the crowd that was at the Republican National Convention. And it's not because those people were born racist. It's not because they were born scared. It was not because they were born fascist. It's not because they were born supporting somebody who is against just about everything they say they're for in terms of values. They had to learn that. And then sitting there in that audience, these people here, I'm looking around like, y'all love Dionne Warwick. And if it's one of y'all that's in here voting for a society that would create something different than what she is projecting right here, clearly a Black woman, a woman who sees herself as an African in the world, who writes about that, who talks about that, but it doesn't mean that she displaces anything else. And she has fought her whole life against racism and discrimination. This is a woman who has started foundations and went around the world. There's room for all that. And she's still spreading that message, even while making it look good. She ain't trying to oversing. The phrasing is just immaculate. This is a trained musician with 2 degrees in composition and music theory. I mean, reads and writes music. I'm like, but if you want to live in a different world, that's why she said I had to perform this song Johnny Mathis was singing. If I want to, I could change the whole thing. She said, we want to, we ain't got to live like this. And it didn't come off preachy, of course, but even if it had, I'd have been cool. But the point is that everybody there, y'all love this, then why we got to live anywhere, any kind of way different than this? You know, it's just something. And I left and, you know, you coming back up this way and you pass people who were going to sleep on the streets, who slept on the streets last night. And I'm reminded of Adam Serwer's book, The Cruelty is the Point. For some people, shout out to Elon Musk, for people like that, you know, it's not enough for you to have more than you could ever need. You want to take something from somebody else, J.D. Vance. You want to take something. Why? You know, you keep pushing, we're going to push back. And maybe that's what's going to happen. Because, you know, we're here on Saturday. And God only knows between this Saturday and next Saturday what's going to happen in this circuit.
I mean, Roy was saying, because, you know, he was at the convention and without
yes.
He said, you know, I miss my security, you know, because when he was with the Daily Show, they would, you know, have security. So I'm just out here. Yeah. But, you know, he said in the moment when everybody's planes were delayed and grounded, you know, there were a lot of Trump supporters in Milwaukee. He said we were all unified in one common goal, which was to let Delta or United or whatever American know we were not happy. And it was wild, you know. And he said in that moment, the politics didn't matter. It was like we all had a common goal. And it takes something like that, right? Where everybody's in distress to say, look at the next person, doesn't matter what they look like, and say, we are in this together.
Well, what does that say? I mean, what does that say about and that's why I brought that up in terms of Dionne Warwick, her stage performance. There was a 4th musician. Notice I only named 3. The 4th, she said he was stuck in California because of what happened. He said he was calling me every 15 minutes. I'm trying to get out. And finally she told him, just go home, baby. I'll see you when we go. Because this thing, it affected last night. In addition to the trains and planes and automobile, her last musician couldn't get there. But I mean, what does that say? That this common moment created some solidarity, and after that common moment passed, those same people be looking at him like, because as far as I'm concerned, they didn't need any of those Republican National Convention delegates didn't need security in Milwaukee. But guess what? The convention is over, so I bet y'all thought y'all did. Y'all glad y'all at the airport and not in downtown Milwaukee, where you've been told it's not safe. You know what I'm saying? Roy Wood would need, the day after the convention, Roy wouldn't think twice about walking in downtown Milwaukee. But all them people he had solidarity with at the airport might. So, I mean, you know, what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was talking about on this hour-long or so conversation she had that was posted in social media is real. There are tiers. There's the politicians you elect. There are these people with money and privilege who want to control everything. And then there's everybody else. And she said, that's why when I was in the room, like, okay, y'all want to replace Biden. I'm not going to try to dissuade you. I'm just going to ask you, what's the plan? And she said nobody had an answer in that group, that elite group, so-called elite group, including lawyers.
They don't want to say it out loud.
Well, no, but this is the thing. This is what I thought was fascinating about it. If y'all haven't seen it, I encourage you to watch this.
We played a clip of it.
Did you? It was fascinating to me because, and she said, this isn't the journalist with a column. Shout out to the New York Times that continues their hit job. This morning it's Michael Shear inside the fight to keep Biden atop the ticket. I mean, they're really Peter Baker and them working overtime. Shout out to them. She says none of them I'm talking about. It's not the politicians. She says the lawyers, because she said, I'm asking the question about ballot access. I'm asking, MAGA Mike Johnson has already said we're going to challenge it. Of course, they're going to go to court to keep Biden on the ballot.
And what people don't know, if there is an ascension of Vice President Harris to president, her vice presidential pick has to clear Congress.
This is exactly right.
Has to clear this Congress with Mike Johnson as the
exactly
the House, and the damn Senate is
exactly
50-50, usually not even 50-50.
That's right. Not even. That's right. Jim Judge.
What are they doing? So what is
that's the question. What is the point?
I'm asking. This is what
is the
I was
point?
talking with Roderick Morrow, right? So there's the new season of The Boys has a character figure. And, these people have superpowers, but it's kind of a flip upside down from the Avengers. Is like they're evil, the people with superpowers. But the one black person, they just put a black woman as one of the boys. And her superpower is super intelligence. She's smarter than everybody.
Yeah, she's like the doppelganger, Tony Stark, T'Challa,
yeah.
Shuri figure. Yeah.
But she's super smart, but they won't listen to her. She has a solution. So she's like, listen, do this. And they're like, nah, but she's the smartest person in the room and they won't listen to her. And I feel like this black people right now, it's so frustrating because we have sat in this for the better part of 100 years.
Yes.
And then some 400 years before that. We know how this thing's going to end.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how season 5 unfolds of The Boys. I finished watching it because, of course, before it was an Amazon series, it was a comic
book, right?
This is the 6 volumes of The Boys.
Whoa.
Yeah, these are the graphic. These are the ones that it is based on.
So that's Laz Alonso.
Yeah, that's Mother Milk, right? Mother's Milk, right there. That's volume 3, and of course, volume 1. Butcher, of course, volume 1. That's how he looks. Kamiko, of course, that's on the cover of volume 4. Frenchie, of course, that's on the volume 5. Huey, who is a little dude in the comics, is volume 2. And then the end volume 6, you see them all together, the boys. But the point is this. Those of you who haven't watched it, and no spoiler alerts, so to speak. But come on back. I think it's interesting because that figure.
So wait, in the comic books, the black woman is there. She's the one that's got the superpower of intelligence.
I don't want to spoil it.
Okay. All right. So far from what I've watched, she's giving solutions that no one's listening to.
But she's giving solutions for the fascists.
Right. And they're still not listening. The point I'm making is it doesn't matter.
Well, maybe they're not listening, but she knows how to manipulate. So in other words, she's smarter than everybody. So she factored in the resistance. That's what you do. Shout out to Barack Obama. You factor in the resistance. There's today's New York Times cover is talking about how Biden is stewing in Delaware because he feels betrayed, especially by Barack Obama. But you can't betray someone who you never were with. So I think there are some parallels between the 40.
Say more. Because again, it's almost like bread and circus. We are fed a certain narrative, the circus. We're giving the circus. Everybody's together. This is why I don't play games with the truth. Y'all gonna get it. You may not like it. It's gonna come. Bam, bam, bam. I'm gonna hit you between the eyes. I don't play with it because any tiddlywinks that you play with the truth, even people, I don't co-sign certain people. I ain't just gonna co-sign. I'll be quiet. I'll be quiet until I'm not quiet, but I'll let you know. If you ask me a direct question, I'm gonna give you a direct answer on folk that I know personally, right?
Yes.
And it doesn't matter a relationship because if it's wrong, it's wrong. It's gonna be wrong today, tomorrow. Doesn't matter that we're friends. If you're wrong, I'm going to say something, right?
You have to. Well, you don't have to, but yeah.
Most people don't. We and but
we
got here. We got all these leaders. Ain't nobody say nothing about.
Well,
and y'all keep allowing it to happen, and no one says anything, and we all internally know this person is a piece of crap, is selfish, they're down for themselves, but then we sit there and let the media put them in our faces like they're our representatives, and we all know the truth. But then by the time the ish hits the fan, it's too late. It's too late because they've been codified as the leader. That's how Van Jones got there. Ain't nobody say nothing. Y'all let that happen.
Well, I mean, we ain't got no, we don't own CNN, and
we
they
don't,
know.
but we own our voices, and they're paying for it right now. The lowest ratings in their history. We're showing them by our lack of support. But if we had done what we are doing now, with a fever pitch, at some point,
let's talk about that. I mean, again, in the context of this social structure we find ourselves in, this weekly conversation that you and I have now with thousands of people in real time, and then over the arc of the intervening weeks, started in the middle of the worst crisis in our lifetimes, and really emerged and developed over a summer and a fall that saw people respond out on a version of what you described Roy and those passengers in the airport went through on steroids. The murder of George Floyd, and everything unfolded, and that's what George Floyd was murdered. A month, maybe a little bit over a month after you press record. So we had just, and then it culminated in, as I was, we're finishing up summer school next week, and our morning class is with fresh people, women and men who are playing volleyball, basketball, football for the university, and men playing football, obviously, but they weren't aware, even though they were around and remember that summer, they at least didn't profess any open awareness of the fact that while the NBA was struggling, the players were whether or not to play. Remember what happened in Milwaukee with Jacob Blake? And then they got down to the bubble in Florida, and LeBron James and them like, yeah, we're going to do this. And of course, they got a call from the Chocolate Wonder, who advised them to perhaps just sit back and make sure that and then they ended up wearing T-shirts, and that's very effective. But that they don't remember that it was the women. It was the Minnesota Lynx in the wake of it, and then the Atlanta Dream. And I said, y'all know who Kelly Loeffler is, huh? And even the sisters in there, the volleyball and basketball players. I said, no, it was black women, and the white women who were on that team with them, they made Kelly Loeffler sell that franchise, y'all, and start playing the, what I'm saying? So y'all have power. We were talking about it, but I'm saying all that to say that here we are 4 short years later, and with a cabal of people who surrounded Joe Biden, and with the help of James Clyburn and others, really black people in South Carolina, basically formed an offensive line and rushed him through to the nomination. These same people, some of them, turn it on Biden now when they could have done it, as Cortez says, 8 months ago. We having a different conversation if y'all want to do that. So what happened between y'all didn't know he was old, y'all didn't know he was losing a step or two or three, y'all didn't know all of a sudden, like, you were at a fundraiser last month, George, where you said now all of a sudden you want to say, and I'm saying all that to say that we may be missing the point. What you're raising is very important, because let me pause here. Again, this is what I wanted to say in terms of context. 4 years ago, this space was just developing. There was no narrative. There was no Nubia. 4 years later, people are looking for places to have these candid and honest conversations. This is one. Here we are in Nubia. We got that space. We still had a front porch in YouTube where people can come in, and Sirius and Channel 126, being a place for candid conversations. People are coming and saying, we got to make sense of this, and Roland's out there, the Black Star Network. He's out, Sheila Jackson Lee made transition. Obviously, he, that was his friend. They're talking about all that. I'm saying all that to say that the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal this morning that is reporting that Elon Musk is now, who said he wasn't going to be in the damn thing, liar to his DNA, says he's committing $45 million a month to a new pro-Trump super PAC, was convincing his tech billionaire friends to come on with him. He said, we do this one at a time, two at a time. People are now looking for places where they can push past the BS. And this is one. This is one of those places. And I again, the eternal thanks and gratitude for something we have to unpack now in real time. And I'm just wondering how long No, let me not say that.
Oh, yeah. Um,
Yeah, no, I'll say something.
let's say this.
Yeah,
Things emerge when the time dictates
that's
for
exactly.
that to happen, and people emerge because the time dictates.
That's exactly.
For most of my career, I was a pariah in many places. People didn't,
Oh,
I wasn't appreciated for my truth telling, especially not in corporate America. They can't stand me, because it's like I'm going to come in and disrupt. If something's wrong, I'm going to say something, and that's never a position that corporations or people in power want. No one wants to be challenged, right? That is not people don't want to be uncomfortable, period.
mhm,
But
mhm.
discomfort is where change happens. And we are now permanently in discomfort. So change has to happen. We have to make it happen because this is untenable, right? We cannot live in a place where a lady calls 911 in Illinois and a sheriff shows up to her house, bosses her around, and when she puts the pot down, he shoots her in the face. She's dead. He's going to go to jail. According to JB Pritzker,
Yeah.
the governor had a statement.
Who's also being floated on the
list. Yeah.
right. I mean, all the millions that he's given to the Democrats and to the Obama campaign, the Pritzkers were one of the biggest engines. But he may go to he may go to jail in Illinois, but she's still
dead, right?
dead.
And the one thing we can't, Terrell Davis on an airplane getting taken off in handcuffs.
Come on,
because some flight attendant, and I can make some assumptions, I won't, said that he hit him, but there's no deep due process in that moment. He's just guilty, right?
Well,
So
period.
We're already in this space. Now, couple that with a president that gives them immunity. So Derek Chauvin in that
the Supreme Court that gives them immunity.
So Derek Chauvin is not going to jail under that, right?
No,
he's not going to jail. There's no due process, and then we go in the streets, we might get shot. So I'm saying, like,
the president sends in and nationalizes the National Guard and tells them to shoot to kill. John Roberts says it's okay. And so you are trying to warn everyone, as we read directly from her dissent in the Trump versus United States. Yeah, if the president does it, it's not against the law. So we're missing the point. I mean, but what you're raising is very important, because set aside Project 2025 and Agenda 47, Trump's gloss of it, even as he claims he didn't know everybody in it, and J.D. Vance praises them at the same time. Set all that aside for a moment. The education, the economics, all the stuff. What you raised might be, in terms of us not missing the point, what you've raised might be the worst of all. It's the attitude. It's the thing that I could put my hands on you on an airplane. I can lie on you, or I could just. We've been getting shot when people call the police, which is why people don't call the police. But now it's like we're not even gonna wait for the call. We just might shoot you in the street. It's not. I mean, it's the attitude. The attitude was always terrible. So when people say, are y'all being alarmist, and you're not paying attention, or you're being.
I mean, if you haven't experienced being pulled over for a traffic violation and feared for your life, no matter what your status is.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and all right, maybe my license, maybe my insurance is expired, but that's not cause to go to jail or to be, you know what I'm saying? Like, but you're afraid. So you got your hands on 10 and 2. You turn it to, yes, it's like, because you want to live. And then if you don't, now there's room there. There's room there for somebody to feel like you're being quote unquote insubordinate. Because that's always the claim. You were insubordinate. You were uncooperative. You were obstructing justice. They always have the claim where you had an air freshener up. They're gonna find your tail light. You know what I'm saying? And in those moments, you're Sandra Bland.
Yeah.
But in that, I don't think that anybody got held accountable or responsible for her death, which they still are claiming she unalived herself.
Killed herself. Yeah.
None of us believe that, including her family. But couple that by 1,000, by 1,000,000, all over the country, where, like you said, the tone now is I can do whatever I want. Now stand your ground takes on a whole new meaning, where you're a little boy going up to a door by accident, you get shot in the head.
Yeah.
Now it is, that now we're like, victims of in our own communities, and that fear is real, and it's not fear mongering. It's history.
No. And therein lies the challenge, isn't it? I mean, what you raised at the beginning in terms of this dating question, the question of dating, is a question of narrative, is a question of stories. What story have you been told? How does it frame your life? And what do you choose to do when the story you've told doesn't match reality? Or perhaps even more frightening, what do you do when the stories you've been told about reality, about nature, about yourself, that you've internalized, aren't refutable by fact, but do exist largely in the realm of interpretation? In the case of dating, as you raised, Prof, and you know, again, for people who are new to our weekly conversations now, we're up to 228. If you're not a member of Knarrative and you don't have the searchable archive, it would take you some time to go back and look in the public facing one. It's all public, but you know, in the one that's curated and preserved in a different format, you'd have to go back and look at our conversations on dating. I think I put most of that stuff in storage, the books on time and Egyptian calendar and these Western concepts of time and notions of time. We talked about the calendrical cycles and where they come from. I can get, you know, we can do a little bit of a summary this morning, this afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Footnote, I'm intrigued by this reality that the Sirius XM app is available globally. I just think that's, I mean, wow, talk about an undiscovered country. It's like you listen anywhere. And so, but anyway, back to the conversation. This question of narrative and dating is very, very obvious. And it's very obvious that the date that we use, July, for Julius Caesar, who also gets an extra day added to his name, 20th, followed by Augustus Caesar, as we talked about, in August, gets a day. And then, of course, you come back to the Latin names in the calendar, and not all of them are Latin. Obviously, you got January, but and other days, other months, but the ones that are named after numbers, October, November, December, now, 8, I mean, no, what is it? 10, 11, 12 in the calendar, but 8, 9, 10 in the Latin language, because these two jammed their names, and their names were jammed in the calendar. Made popular 2 generations ago by Gil Scott-Heron in his famous song did it dash, the ghetto code. He said, once you create a language that doesn't mean anything, or switch up the letters in a language and the words in a language, you're going to have whole sentences and concepts that don't mean anything. He said, look at your calendar. And then he walks through very famously, those of you who remember Gil Scott-Heron doing that. But at any rate, the question of what day it is, what month it is, what year it is completely arbitrary. There's a book, and somebody may find it in either the Nubia or the YouTube chats. And I'm closing my eyes because I can see the cover, I can see his name, but I haven't seen it around here in a while. And I don't know if I packed it up in the boxes and boxes and boxes and got out of here this summer, but it's called Millennium. The author of the book, I almost see his name. I don't know if I'll be able to call it between now and then, because it's been a long time since I looked at it. There are a couple of books that always float in my head that I need to get my hands back on to keep in the kind of working library here, and that's one of them.
What's the topic? What's the topic?
Well, what he's writing about is he's writing about time, and he's writing about narrative, and he starts the book with a discussion of the arbitrariness of time, meaning that time is a constant, like space. However, how we interpret it, how we experience it, is the thing that we can debate and discuss. But that might, to bring in another thinker, one of our Jegnas, Dr. Beatty, myself, Dr. Watkins, Theophilo Benga, would say, it might put it in one of Dr. Obenga's 3 categories: not knowledge by reason or fact. This is the reality. Not knowledge by faith. This is what I believe, although it would kind of bleed into that for reasons I'll say in about 30 seconds. It'd be knowledge by opinion. This is just my experience. This is how I feel it. What the author is saying in this book is that this could be year 1, month 1, day 1. right now, today, if we chose to. It's a cultural grounding. So when you say the year of our Lord, Latin AD, when you say before Christ, BC, as you said, this was a political choice made by the Roman Empire. You can't beat the Christians, so you join them. And not only do you join them, once you join them, you narrate what that Christianity is. And that's where we get European Christianity, also known as Catholicism. It's before there's any Protestant tradition. It's before there's any opinion-based faith traditions that then generate different narratives based on the politics and the cultural grounding of what they're trying to achieve. So there aren't any Protestants, no Pilgrims, there are no Baptists, there's no Methodists, certainly no African Methodists there, or African Methodist Zion. There are no Pentecostals. There are no Seventh-day Adventists, as I say, Sheila Jackson Lee's mother, who went to Oakwood College. She wouldn't have been able to go to Oakwood College because, of course, her ancestors were not aware of any Christianity. The European filter through which Christianity passed and then returned to Africa had not yet fully formed. There was no Martin Luther, and there was no Protestant revolution. There was Catholicism. And that narrative by the Romans, who, as you say, were not Christians, they congealed around it. And what they did in order to bring in Christians into their empire and more fully absorb them and continue to make progress was that they added them to and again, these Africana studies categories apply to all human beings. We're applying them to African people because we need a discipline to be able to think with ourselves. That's why we put social structure separately, but they apply to everyone. And this is another example of it. The Romans had their ways of knowing. They were not Christian, as we know. And in terms of the governance formations they formed in the larger global social structure they were encountering as they encountered non-Romans, which is why people, these filmmakers are still obsessed with telling the story of Rome, whether it be Gladiator 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or 11, while they would even be mad in Tunisia about a black man playing Hannibal because they have their own narratives about who that African was and his father. In that process, the Romans have their own ways of knowing, and they create governance formations by absorbing other people who have different ways of knowing. And in the cultural meaning making of those moments, when we get some concept of bread and circuses, the distractions, the kind of things that we see in this society that have always existed in one form or another, they also emerge in that moment with their own crafted movement and memory. And part of the calendar is movement and memory. The movement and memory category, the sixth category in our Africana Studies framework, remember, is the category that asks the question, how did or do African people pass from generation to generation to generation? Significant moments, significant things they want to remember. How is it passed on from generation to generation to generation as they move through time and space? How is that memory crafted? Well, it applies to any human society, including the Romans. And how do they preserve and move in terms of movement and memory? The calendar is an example of that movement and memory. January, February, March, April, May, June. You know, those groupings, those names, those clusters of days into months are narrated and attached to pre-Christian concepts. And then, of course, you know, in the days of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you don't see Christian concepts. You see Roman concepts, and not all of them, Thor's Day, for example, not all of them from Roman history, Roman cultural meaning making. They absorb, and literally the days of the week are a reflection of the residue of empire, the residue of Roman Empire, 7 days a week, which is an absurd way. To the Egyptians had a calendar of 30 days, 10 days each. At the end of the calendar, the 360th day, they had 5¼ days they still had to account for, because the reality is that the earth, the sun, the moon, the universe knows nothing about the way we try to narrate time and space. It is going to be time and space regardless of where we're here or not. So what they developed was a way of gathering those 5¼ days until they had 360 of them. And once they had 360 of them, y'all do the math, it'll come up to almost 60 years. They then had a leap year. And then they made a narrative around why there were 5¼ days left. In the narrative, Osiris, Set, Nebet, and Setek, who the Greeks call Isis, Osiris, Nephthys, and Set, brother, sister, husband, wife, Isis and Osiris together, Osiris and Set together, and Nebet and Setek together, Nephthys and Set, they were husband and wife, also brother and sister. And when the two men got into a scrap because Setek overstepped his boundaries, in the words of Charlie Murphy, perhaps a habitual line stepper, was Satek. Satek representing the impulse we all have to do stuff that's out of order. One of the inspirations, one of the roots, according to a lot of those who study Africana ways of knowing through the Egyptian, or perhaps Satan, not good and evil. The fact that we all have all those impulses in ourselves. So in some ways, those four are just representatives of the impulses that we have as humans. But as they beef, Set kills his brother. Set kills Osiris. And the Greeks get a hold of the story and throw all kind of mixed stuff in there. They say that Set cut up Osiris and strew his body all around, and then the two sisters got together to put the body back together, and they found everything but the penis, so they fashioned the penis and got her pregnant in the spiritual world and all that. And, you know, that's where the Greeks would say the Tekken, what we call the obelisk, comes from. Washington Monument, not as obelisk, is just stacked up brick, but an obelisk is one single piece of stone, but it's shaped in an obelisk. So the tombstones in the cemetery, again, small mini obelisk kind of concept. Of course, this is Greek. For the Egyptians, they kept it simple. He killed his brother. His brother now becomes the Lord of the Westerners, the Kimwer, the Great Black. He's over there with the Westerners. This is where Wolseer is. But again, how this relates to the calendar is very clear. Egyptians had 12 months, 30 days, 10 days in a week, 3 weeks a month. 10, 10, 10, 30, 10, 10, 10, 30, 10, 10, 10, 30, 10, 10, 10, 30, 10, 10, 10, 30, 10, 10, 10, 30, 10, 10, 10, 30, 10, 10, 10, 30, 10, 10, 10, 30, 10, 10, 10, 30, 10, 10, 10, 30, 10, 10, 10, 30, 10, 10, 10, 30. Okay, we ran out of, okay, we got 5.25 days. Here's the story. Osiris is dead. Isis is inconsolable. Nephthys comes to Isis and says, sis, we can't bring him back. Because once you're gone, you're gone. Another thing people get wrong about African people. They're animists, they're polytheists. Everybody calm down. Study Africa on its terms. There's one creator. We just name all the different spirits, the Orisha or the Necheru, and it's everybody calm down. You know, because when Europeans do it, nobody getting mad. It's St. Anthony, it's St. Paul. You got all you named your saints, huh? But when it come to us, you got a problem. That's because of the racism. That's all right, though. The racism, we'll hold that aside because we ain't got near the racism yet. So don't worry, sis. We can't bring him back, but we can continue our people in the next generation. How you gonna do that? We didn't have any children. Y'all don't have no kids. Everybody calm down. We'll get you pregnant. You'll have a child. How that gonna work? So, because Set is now running the Nile Valley. See, the whole thing was Set would rule part, upper Kemet, and which is down here because it's going toward the Mediterranean, and Wolseer would have upper Kemet. Satek would have lower Kemet. But Satek killed his brother. So now he's running everything, and he's on the lookout for any challenges to the throne. So Isis is like, I can't. If I try to get pregnant, you know, the baby, he gonna see the baby. Don't worry, I gotta get. She goes to Jehudi or Toth, the Netcher. Remember Toth and Setet, Toth and Seshet, Ma'at. These are kind of like the guardians in a way. Ma'at is. She's just the balance. Ma'at is the reality. You know, everything has equal and opposite reaction, truth, justice, balance, order, reciprocity, however you want to say it. There's another sister, Sheshet, the original hidden figure, if we must use contemporary parlance, because she is the lady of the library, the mistress of the library, the sister and the mother of the library. She is the one who stores all the records. And her consort, her companion, her brother, her other half, her sink is Jehudi. The Greeks call him Toth. The Romans call him Mercury. Much more diminished. Leave those two little poop butt examples of that alone. Go to the original, Jehudi. Jehudi starts playing a game with the moon. His objective? To start saving up time for Isis to get pregnant in the spirit world by her husband, who's now the Lord of the Westerners, the ancestors, everybody in the cemetery, so that they can have a baby. So he starts playing a game. And every time he plays this game, draughts is what they would call it in the Greek. Every time he plays this game with the moon, he wins. And what does he win? 5.25 days. Oh, so he wins 5.25. He wins again, 10.5 days. He wins and again, 15.75 days. He keeps winning. He keeps beating the moon. The moon keeps playing phases of the moon. See, they're telling stories to explain natural phenomena. And guess what? He wins enough times in a row till he wins 360 days. And then he gives the days to Isis and Neptus to say, handle your business. They go to the spirit world. Isis is impregnated by her husband, Wasir or Osiris. She gets pregnant. They would call that, friends, the conception was, like the plan, immaculate. Some of y'all probably now have peeped where the virgin birth came from. Anyway, the point is, it's a spiritual impregnation, but then in the physical world, she gives birth to Heru or Horus, the falcon, who the Egyptians see by the sun all the time. Well, that 360 days, or what we would now call a true leap year, what we have now is a leap day after they messed up the calendar. A leap year, the baby is now full grown. Of course, this is a story. So you full grown in 3 months, don't quibble on this. Again, this is knowledge by faith, really, but it's describing knowledge by reason, which is the calendar, the calendrical cycles. That's why their calendars look the way they did. Divided, by the way, into 3 seasons: the flood season, the planting and harvest season, the lie fallow drought season, until the flood season returns. And it was in those 4 months of a year, in that third season, when they did public works to put everybody to work. That's where the pyramids came from. Slaves didn't build the pyramids. I'm sorry, friends. That's knowledge by faith. That would be what Obenga says. Everybody's faith, you don't challenge it. But if you want to wander over here into knowledge by reason, you have to go to the facts. And so Heru emerges, and then he fights his uncle. He subdues his uncle. He don't kill him, though, because that's his uncle ways of knowing. And then Heru basically, in the stories now, they would say he avenges his father, but it's all very, in fact, if you want to read a modern gloss on that, there is, showed y'all this many times, of course, Ikwe Ama, Wat in Shemsu, Myth, History, Philosophy, and Literature, the African Record by Ikwe Ama. He gives a kind of update on that. Not an update, a modern gloss on it, but he starts, of course, with the meta nature. So you see here, Wat, Net, which is the way of, net of, Shemsu. Shemsu has been translated as followers, but the more accurate translation into English would be companions. Shemsu, as in Jedi Shemshu Jehudi, the one who speaks as a companion of Jehudi. Or it could be translated as follower, but companion is much more robust. That would be Dr. Jacob Carruthers. That was his Kemetic name. So how that fits with the calendar and what we're talking about today, and opening up in this question of when we missed the point, we look at the arbitrariness of time. This could be day 1, month, week 1, month 1. The Egyptians had the good sense, after thousands of years of observation as human beings, and then congealing it after centuries into a thing that would sync their opinion on how to label time with the reality of time and space, to do 12 months of 30 days and 10 weeks, 10 days a week. The Romans decided to craft a system that emerged into 7 days a week for 4 weeks, which gives you 28 days. And then you got days left over. And then you're going to name some days for the people you conquered or yourself. Then you're going to put in some names at the end in Latin. And now your calendar is off by 2 months because you put human names, July and August, into it. And okay, you do you. Right now, we're having this conversation on July the 20th. 2024, but in China, they're saying, yes, July 20th, 2024. Okay, when you're not doing business, when you are synced with your own ways of knowing, and you have your own movement and memory, what year is it? Oh, it's about 4724, but don't say that to them. They'll lose their damn minds. Why? Because we're just waiting. Another 10, 20, 100 years to 80 years, whatever. It's still going to be whatever the year is when we exchange out all the money, and the yuan is the major currency in the world, and it's not even a multipolar world. They over there having bread riots. Maybe then Panera will take on a different significance in what is the United States of America after they fractured into many different things. We ain't got to worry about that right now. We say, oh yeah, it's 2024. In our heads, 4724. What year is it in the Muslim world? It always tickles me. It's always 2 things that happen when I ask what year is it in the Muslim world in a classroom of students. What almost always emerges is that there are Muslim students in that classroom. And you can't tell a Muslim student by color. It's a question of culture. It's a question of faith. And when I ask and somebody puts their hand up and makes a comment that shows you that we're about 400 years behind, just a little over 400 years behind what the Christian calendar is, 2024, and the Muslim calendar. I think it's 400 years. Somebody put in the chat, because we're talking about the death of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, early 8th century. So it wouldn't be 400. Y'all do the math. I'll look here and see. As you all are putting it in, I'll pull it up. Somebody will give me the date. What is the year? Those of you know the Islamic calendar. Just put the year on and you'll tell me. But at any rate, it ain't 2024 yet. You still got centuries to come before that. And so the question of naming days, weeks, months, all that stuff is political. And then so they try to squash a little bit of the beef. Not the beef. It's not beef. It is beef, depending on what you do with what you think is true when you're missing the point of the numbers. The point of the numbers is to build governance formations in a social structure. That's the point. The point isn't the narrative itself. The point is what the narrative is built to serve. So the point isn't whether or not Donald Trump was shot a week ago in Western Pennsylvania. The point is to get people to start wearing patches of white cloth on their ear. So the question of the number, the United Nations, UNESCO, for example, in their General History of Africa, they say we're going to suggest other ways of marking time. Thank you, Al. 1446. Yeah, so 600 years, almost 600 years. Thank you. Yeah, because that would, yeah, of course. Thank you, brother. Appreciate you, Al. 1446 in the Muslim calendar, Islamic calendar, rather. So again, what is the narrative date in that way of knowing that becomes the most significant? It's the life and death of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as several people have said in the chats. Now, what you see, though, is that as the world shrinks, not physically, but in terms of science and technology being able to communicate with each other, it becomes more difficult to countenance one narrative. So the United Nations, of course, attempting to in fact, let me pause here and just add this while we're continuing, because these global entities become very important. This didn't make the front page of today's Financial Times, but nevertheless, we'll pause here for about 2 minutes to read the headline and the first couple of paragraphs, because it's important at 9:36 Eastern Time, rather. Top UN court rules Israel occupation of Palestinian lands illegal. This is Mehul Shrivastava reporting from London. Israel's 57-year-old occupation of East Jerusalem and the West Bank is illegal under international law, the UN's highest court has said, casting the Jewish state's conduct toward Palestinians living under its military control as a decades-long violation of their rights. In a series of findings yesterday, that will be Friday, the International Court of Justice ruled that almost every aspect of Israeli policy in the West Bank was illegal. From the creation and support of sprawling settlements to the application of discrimination laws and of Israeli sovereignty over East Jerusalem. Shout out to Ivanka Trump trying to stay out of view, and shout out to the people who miss the point when they start reading narratives and say, see, Ivanka not with them. She's a moderate. Is she a moderate? Trump's second term, do you think that her husband and her are not going to be selling them condos on the West Bank? Friends, don't miss the point. She ain't got to be at the convention. Trump wins the White House, she gonna be in the White House, and her slimy husband gonna be selling condos that are built literally on the ashes of bodies of children, women, and men who ain't done nothing except were born. Continuing, the article writes, quote, Israel's continued presence in the occupied territories is unlawful, end quote, said the opinion backed by a majority of judges at the International Court of Justice. Quote, it should be brought to an end as rapidly as possible, end quote. The ruling, in response to a 2022 request by the UN General Assembly, found that none of the legal architecture of Israel's occupation complied with international humanitarian law in a damning, if toothless, indictment of how Israel has interpreted its obligations toward the Palestinians under the Geneva Conventions. While dealing a diplomatic blow to Israel, the advisory opinion of UN General Assembly will have little immediate impact, given that it is non-binding. Israel is already ignoring one from 2004, 20 years ago, which declared that its separation barrier, which took swaths of the West Bank into Israeli territory, to be illegal. Israel's Prime Minister, BB, Benjamin Netanyahu, said on X, owned by Mr. Apartheid himself, Elon Musk, who is now pumping $45 million a month into into a PAC to support Donald Trump as the middle tier that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez mentioned in her video, between the politicians and the electorate, that little tier that has a fraction of it now calling for Joe Biden to resign. Keep punching Joe Biden in the face. The white supremacists, the fascists, the billionaires, which is the point itself, the rich. Don't miss the point. Racism is the point, but beyond racism is control and wealth and economics. Those people are closing ranks quickly, and Elon Musk is one of them. And on the company that Elon Musk took completely private, the one where you think you can say what you want until he flips his little master switch. Of course, that's not Nubia. Friends, a word to the wise is sufficient, as my 8th grade science teacher, Miss Baines, used to say. At any rate, on that, this is what he said. Quote, "The Jewish people are not occupiers in their own land, neither in our eternal capital, Jerusalem, nor in the land of our ancestors in Judea and Samaria." No, the ancestors of the Jewish people are in Africa, baby. They're in Africa, baby. And not apartheid South Africa, baby. They're in East Africa. Among the Amara, among the Tigray, among the Ethiopians, the Eritreans. If you go ask the Ethiopians where the Ark of the Covenant is, they'll tell you, we got it, and we ain't going to show it to you. That's what they tried. That's what Skip Gates went over there and wonders of the African world. Show me the Ark of the Covenant. You lost your damn mind. You ain't got no damn home training. They ain't give you no home training in West Virginia, Skip. By the way, congratulations to Professor Gates. He won the Spingarn Medal last week at the NAACP convention. But at any rate, it's in Ethiopia, Elon. But you know that already, don't you? Yeah, you like Dr. Kevin Roberts or head of the Heritage Foundation. You know better, but you understand that most people are going to miss the point, and you give them a fake narrative. And here you are on your wholly owned Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, saying that the Jewish people are not occupiers in their own land, neither in our eternal capital, Jerusalem, nor in the land of our ancestors in Judea and Samaria. No false distinct decision in The Hague. False decision now will distort this historical truth, and likewise the legality of Israeli settlement in all the territories of our homeland cannot be disputed. From the river, my friends, from the river. That would be that Jordan that y'all want to get baptized in. From the river to the Mediterranean Sea. Red Sea. The Romans referred to the Mediterranean, not as the Mediterranean. They had a phrase which translates from the Latin as our sea. But people want to stop people protesting from saying from the river to the sea, because many of those people who are not calling for the destruction of Israel, who are not calling for a two-state solution, not directly, who are saying, no, just let everybody in the region vote. Everybody have the same rights. Oh, you can't do that, because what you have in Israel for many people, including Elon funky ass Musk, is an ethno-state, a white nationalist state, a white supremacist state. I'm going to sit out the election. No, you're not. You're a white nationalist. You're an apartheid-loving, bizarro Tony Stark. And your whole dream, sir, is from the river to the sea. Purge them all. Bomb them all. Some Palestinians have been killed while we in this conversation. Bet on it. And next Wednesday, BB will be in the United States of America addressing the United States Congress, because MAGA Mike Johnson sent him an invitation, because the white nationalists are in the legislature. And meanwhile, you got people saying, I don't know who I'm going to vote. I'm going to vote for Trump because he did help HBCUs and I made more money under Trump. The vomit coming out of their mouth, realizing that you're putting the knife in the hand of the person that's going to cut your throat. So the international communities, now I'm back from the footnote about the ICJ, because it's one of those international entities. And the reason that the Financial Times and everybody else can say it's toothless is because the UN don't have an army that's got the muscle that can do anything to enforce that, even as Israel is becoming more and more a pariah state, the vast majority of people in the world understanding that. Just like the vast majority of people in the United States with good sense understand that Van Jones has become a minstrel and ain't nobody listening to Amber Rose. And let's be clear about all that. It doesn't matter if you don't have the muscle to do something. At least in the short term, we can do something about that. if we choose to here in the United States, at least in terms of making sure nobody hears from them again, in terms of any opining that would just make you lose sleep or at least make your stomach upset. In the case of military, they don't have the muscle to enforce this thing against what has increasingly become a pariah state with a lot of ethno-nationalists who are being opposed within the borders of Israel by Israelis who are saying this is wrong. So let's not make this about Israel versus the world. Let's make it about politicians like Bibi Netanyahu in Israel and those who support him, who are animating the killers of the Israeli Defense Force, who have bombing churches and camps. Another set of bombings took place this week. Them against all the other people, the millions in Israel and around the world, who are saying this must end. This is peace. Is what Dionne Warwick was singing about last night. If we choose to, we can change the world. We can do that. But these international groups, at least that's a step to saying this is wrong, with all the flaws of the ICJ, with all the flaws of the United Nations. And I bring all that up because to say, at least you recognize that these are narratives that have been set up to keep people apart and to keep people at each other's throats. And so when they came to the question of BC and AD, the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, another branch of the UN, tried to reconcile in its general histories. We see this in the General History of Africa, for example, the 8 volumes and counting UNESCO General History of Africa. I don't even think I have any of their abridged versions around here now. The unabridged versions are the ones you really want to get if you can, but you can get the abridged versions and get the meat without getting all of the full context. And you can go to the United Nations website, as we've talked about a couple of times before in class, and download some of those volumes right to your computers. I don't think having or not having Windows will affect it. But in the first volume, they talk about dating. And they say there's, a lot of people in the world, billions of people who are not Christians, who are not Muslims. So we will suggest a couple of things. Instead of saying before Christ, we'll say before the common era. Okay. Well, that doesn't displace Christianity because you just changed the C from Christ to common era. Okay. Common era would be after the 0, right? Yeah. And then you would say ACE. So at least you've taken after the common era, it starts, but you still gonna have the numbers, right? They said, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we say BP? What is BP? Before the present. Okay. So if you say before the present, if right now is the present and you keep that Western calendar, then last year is, minus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, going backward, but you're still using 2024. So there's really no way, if you want to have a common conversation, this is the Babel dilemma, so to speak. You can't change it if you want to have common conversation. What you can do, and this is where the politics of translation becomes so important. You can keep whatever way you have, your ways of knowing, your cultural meaning making, your movement and memory. You can keep your uses of science and technology. You can keep your governance formations. But if you want to emerge into a larger social structure, you're going to have to figure out ways to get along, or you're going to have to eliminate all the people who don't see it your way. The West has tried to eliminate or subdue damn near everybody they can over the arc of the last half millennia, easy. A little bit earlier, but we'll say the last 500 years or so. How's that worked out for the West? Well, the West wasn't able to eliminate everybody, and people are kind of have been recovering, never fully subdued from these gut punches that came from the West. Yes, yes, yes. So, on the way back last night from watching Dionne Warwick do her thing, I watched, I was reading rather, the first part of a new book by Jessica Goudeau, who teaches creative nonfiction at Wilkes University, a native Texan. The name of her book is We Were Illegal, Uncovering a Texas Family's Myth-Making and Migration. And the reason I was reading it is because she, on her father's side, she goes back to the early 19th century in Texas. White folks who went out there, people of Church of Christ, white people who went out there. Some people call them settlers. Many people who they settled on would call invaders. And so she's grappling with this history. She said, I grew up in Texas. I learned the history. I love Texas. I still love Texas. But the more I learned, the more I realized that we ain't going to have no Texas if we are not grappling with these difficult questions. She starts the book. I have loved Texas my whole life. Even when we moved away, my family had a long history of boomeranging back to the state over many generations and for my entire childhood. She goes on. She says, she grew up in San Antonio, and she talks about these migrations, and she talks about how the violence in Texas, she wasn't aware of it as a child, but as she got older and started studying, she has a PhD from the University of Texas, Austin, she understood then that this whole narrative has to change. The people who were here, who got run over, who the border crossed, who you then say are illegals, even though they've been here for centuries and you weren't here, this is a problem. And she breaks down this book, We Were Illegal, talks about and breaks into 6 parts through family histories, the narratives of all the different people who now make up Texas. And she says near the end of the introduction, she says that she says, I framed the questions that guided me in this book. What can I take from the past moving forward? And what do I want to leave behind? What are the foundations of my values and beliefs about myself, about the world, and my place in it? What should I change? What can we learn from this difficult time period? What would it take for everyone, not just some people, in Texas to flourish? What kind of ancestor do I want to be as I shape the future of this state that I love? Okay, here's where I would depart from Dr. Godot. I have no fidelity to Texas or the United States or any country anywhere in the world that comes before my fidelity to myself and humanity. Those flags are narratives, just like those dates on the calendar. We miss the point when we empty all of that into a social structure that can't hold its weight. She makes that point actually here, which is interesting, thinking about this in terms of our brother Roy Wood Jr., who we were laughing about now yesterday yesterday morning on Sirius in the morning show, about how Roy talks about James Brown singing Living in America. This is after a brother would call from Augusta, Georgia, and which claims to be, it's the home of James Brown. It's claimed one of the many claims to fame, and along with North Augusta, South Carolina. But talks about how, James Brown sings that song Living in America, where Roy talks about, he says, Black people will tell you the places where Black people can get down and have a good time. And it's in places like James Brown names in Living in America, right? In California Love with Dr. Dre and Tupac. So yeah, it's places. And interesting enough, but Dr. Godot writes in We Were Legals is, she said the same attitude applies. She wasn't comparing it to what I just did, but she said in Texas, people identify with their church, with their community, maybe with their city. But the concept of Texas isn't the first thing her ancestors put stock in. They put stock in the people who thought like them, who moved like them. The nation state is a fiction. It's a narrative. What holds it together? The shrines, the icons, the rituals, the totems, as we talked about in our Introduction to Africana States class. We started talking about cultural meaning making. What icons? This is why I say maybe by the time Lurie, Daniel's favorite, your grandchildren are adults, African people in the United States, if they're still United States, will be able to have a mature conversation about who Barack Hussein Obama was. I mean, it'd be easy to do it now. All it would take is studying his policy record, studying what he's written about himself. And, but we can't do that because Obama's an icon. An icon is a figure of uncritical praise. It allows communities to congeal around. And as Obama said when he was running in 2008, I am a Rorschach's test. People project themselves onto me. What do you think? Hey, yes, we can. Hope. Okay. But then I see when you become president, the policies that we were led to believe. No, you led yourselves to believe that. I never said that. So, talk about transforming the federal bench. Where are the Black people on the Supreme Court? Although I count Sonia Sotomayor as Black. But then you get another bite at the apple and you put Elena Kagan on there where you couldn't have a straight, English-speaking African person. And okay, that's fine. All right, no problem. Then you get another bite at the apple and you think you're going to make peace with these white supremacists, and you put up one of the greatest examples of affirmative action in the history of the United States of America, Merrick Garland, up. if he had nominated a black woman to be Supreme Court, we may never have had to deal with Donald John Trump. You know how many black people would have rallied behind him if Mitch McConnell tried to stop a sister from getting on the Supreme Court and probably pushed Hillary Clinton across the finish line. But make no mistake about it, Barack Obama played a central role in ensuring that Hillary Rodham Clinton was the nominee and not Joe Biden. I'm not caping for Joe Biden. I'm just walking through what Obenga would say history is fact. History is reason. This is an opinion, friends. And so whatever we think about or didn't think about Joe Biden in the election of 2020, when the world was on fire and we were in the streets, and this conversation we had just barely begun, let's be very clear about the fact that it is undeniable, it is attested, it is factually rendered that the 44th president of the United States in the election of 2016 was like, yeah, why don't you slow your roll, Joe? I'm not really. And then throws his weight behind Hillary Clinton. But it's also not a matter of opinion. We got stuck with the bill for the Obama presidency, good, bad, or indifferent. And again, maybe by the time the Reed's grandchildren are adults, we can actually read the things that have already been written and look at the things in real time that we experienced and understand everything, beginning with the bailout of the banks and then the mortgage, in the mortgage crisis, but not the bailout of the people who were underwater. Shout out Timothy Geithner if you want to read about this. Confidence Men is a good book that walks through the financial crisis of 2008. We could go on. And again, this isn't a critique. I have no interest at this point of engaging in a back and forth based in opinion and faith about a political figure who is an elected politician. Hey, it's better that Barack Obama was president than not. But let's be very clear. He was president of the United States, not the president of black people, as we were constantly reminded at the time. And as you say, Professor Hunter, there is something personal in that for me because, I love, admire, and listen very carefully to the words and the work of Jeremiah Wright Jr., who would say, I ain't got nothing to say about this. The man did what he had to do. Just like Minister Farrakhan said, the man did what he had to do. No problem. I understand all that. But what we're not going to do is narrate this differently in contravention of the facts. And if anybody wants to have this conversation, not only do I welcome it, I want to have that conversation. Come on in, Nubia, on Monday night. Let's see, can y'all please somebody prove me wrong that we can have a mature conversation about this, because now it is 2024. It is July 2024. And what you are seeing in real time is that group that Ocasio-Cortez was talking about, that group between the people who are elected and the masses of people who have the potential to vote in the United States. That group has now decided, some of them, that they want Joe Biden out. At a moment when Ocasio-Cortez says, I come in the room, I ask the lawyers, not the pundits, not the political ops, not the billionaires. I'm asking the lawyers, how will this work? And nobody has an answer. Because, see, there are a couple of things you have to understand very clearly about this. The Democratic National Committee met yesterday virtually. They have a virtual nomination process set in place. And in that virtual nomination process, it will begin shortly, friends. This isn't faith. This isn't opinion. This is fact. So, somebody like, and everybody's consulting with their people. One of the people I'm always going to consult with is my sister. The reason I'm sitting here right now, because I would never have met you, Professor Hunter. I would listen to you, and I said, why's Karen Hunter? But who brought me up and sat in your studio, Ajwa Bachwe Asmoah, who reported to, over the arc of this Biden-Harris presidency, the Secretary of HUD, Marsha Fudge. I listened to Ajwa. Ajwa can't say a whole lot, but one thing she did remind me of, including sending me the link, which you can all find on YouTube, is the link to the Democratic National Committee meeting that took place yesterday. We all know what happened. Or maybe we don't. Maybe we're looking at people with white cloth over their ears, and maybe we're still arguing about rappers or whatever. Maybe we're watching Many Men memes from last week. But at any rate, that DNC that met yesterday set in motion the nomination process for Joseph Robinette Biden. You understand? While we arguing on social media as to whether or not he should withdraw, Ocasio-Cortez asked them, how y'all going to do this, especially since the nomination process is already underway, it's about to be underway, especially since you understand that if he withdraws, Mike Johnson, MAGA Mike, and all these Republicans have already said they're going to file lawsuits. Let me tell you why they're going to file lawsuits. It won't just be because if you miss that August 1st deadline in places like Ohio, they will say, no, you got to keep him on the ballot. So you're going to endanger. And she said there are several of these states with these deadlines that are so-called battleground states, which means you won't have nobody on the ballot. Do you understand they're licking their chops at the idea that you're going to replace him? And if you replace him, you say, well, he could resign now. Kamala Harris could be the president, and then she could run as the incumbent. Yeah, except her vice president pick. Who would that be? Would it be Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania? Would it be J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois? Would it be Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan? This is where we get into knowledge by opinion, you see. Polls, by the way, all the polls, opinion polls. See, I actually read the AP North poll, and many of you did as well. That's that one poll they've been hanging their hats on. It's like 2/3 of the Democrats said they don't want Joe Biden to be the presidential nominee. Who the hell is saying that? New York Times, Washington Post, Van Jones, every idiot in news, commercial, entertainment media. But then you read the AP North poll. In fact, let me see. Do I have my notes from yesterday? Because you know, I bring the paper to the studio every day. That's Wednesday. That is Wednesday. Hold on, friends. Give me 15 seconds here. This might be it. No, that's Saturday. Let me see. I switched out bags because I wasn't gonna bring my big bag down there to the here we are. My big bag to the Dionne Warwick concert. Here it is. Just some numbers from the North poll. And by the way, again, serious being invaluable. Prof, I'm having the time of my life on there because in real time every day, beginning with us in the morning, handing off that baton to Larry Daniels' favorite, then to Clay Kane, and you running that anchor leg. It's just so much information, so much conversation, ability for people to convene and have conversations, and thinking about the synergies. Then here we are on Saturdays, and then here we have Nubia. Sunyata will be here with Maroon's medicine chest tomorrow. We got to heal ourselves and keep strong through this, and then we empty into the week. Office hours on Monday night, where thousands come. And we had this conversation. Now I really am serious about this Obama thing. I met Barack Obama when he was in the Illinois State Senate. Let me be very clear. I ain't got no smoke for that dude as a person. I don't know him. As Jetty could say, I don't know you. You ain't familiar. And I don't think any of us do either. And those of you who do know him, please, if you do, come on in. We can have a personal conversation too. I'm talking straight policy, friends. Because it's a serious time for Black people. We got stuck with the bill for a presidency that didn't do what we thought it was going to do, but that the white supremacists used as a rallying point. You understand? So at any rate, this is yesterday's. I won't read from yesterday's paper except to bring one thing up, because yesterday morning we had a guest on to talk about, as this crisis, this Microsoft Windows crisis was unfolding in real time. She came on to talk about the implications of this question of infrastructure and AI, and this question of technology and how this exposes weaknesses. Perhaps this was Y2K, except it happened now, accidentally or unintentionally, or certainly for all of us unaware, where it didn't happen in 2000, if y'all remember that. But there was a article beneath the fold that I mentioned to her, and then she said something very chilling. This was yesterday's New York Times. Meta explores stake and Ray-Ban maker with eye on outlook for smart glasses. Yeah, Meta wants to buy the makers of Ray-Ban to get a hold of them glasses, because they're going to make some Google. You remember they had Google Glass? They're going to make a better version of it and say, what the hell? We don't need to start from scratch. We just buy a Ray-Ban maker. Ray-Bans. Everybody cool with the Ray-Bans, right? And what this lady said was, because she used to work for Facebook, now Meta. By the way, the Winklevoss twins, whatever, they now part of that Silicon Valley group that's pumping money into J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is the Manchurian candidate for the Silicon Valley boys. That's who he is. It's, they had a $300,000 a plate meeting. And at that meeting, these Silicon Valley cats told Trump, pick J.D. Vance. This is an opinion, friends. That was on the front page of the New York Times yesterday. But anyway, I'm bringing this up because what she said was, in fact, Facebook owner Meta is exploring a multi-billion euro investment in eyewear group EssilorLuxottica, as the social media platform intensifies its push to develop smart glasses. This is what she said yesterday. She said, wow. She said, understand, Can you imagine how terrifying it's going to be when people put their glasses on and turn every pair of glasses in the world into surveillance devices to map your face, to hear your voice, to take you and dump you into a database? And then you'll be watching In Class, and Professor Hunter and I will be talking about something the complete opposite, because AI would have matched our voices, matched our faces, and just saying, I'm going to watch for a couple of hours. Gotcha. Anyway, back to the point. I had written on the bottom of this some of the notes from the AP NORC page, which is why I picked the paper up. Let's just very clear. Those polled who said they are unsatisfied with the nominee, with Biden as the nominee, 62% of those polled by the AP NORC poll, which is the one they use and say 2/3 of the Democrats, 62% said they're dissatisfied with Biden. So this is what they're running with and all these funky ass narratives. Again, this is narrative. This is knowledge by reason. It's knowledge by opinion. These are opinions being floated. And by opinions, in that people from the middle strata, and not all of them. You know, Ocasio-Cortez is 3 strata. Politicians, the backers and the billionaires and the political ops and the consultants who got a different agenda. Don't miss the point. Their agenda is power, control. And then all the rest of us. Well, 62% said, polled said they're unsatisfied with the nominee. That's what they've been running with. What they haven't, I'm seen reported, and please forgive me if y'all seen it, please put it here. But I know what none of us have seen, which is reported with equal weight or in the same breath. I haven't seen it at all, but maybe if it's been reported, it ain't been reported the same. All they running with is the Biden number. Do you think they asked any of these people whether or not they were satisfied with Trump? They did, and 57% said they weren't satisfied with Trump as the nominee. And it's coming out of people who were polled out the armored Christian soldier base. Over half of them, 57 and 62, last I checked the math, that's 5% difference. Not negligible, but certainly not enough to quibble about. A distinction perhaps without a difference. 2/3 of the people said today, but damn near 2/3 said they didn't want Trump. Certainly over half. What are you talking about? We know what you're talking about. You're crafting a narrative. Don't miss the point here. You're crafting a narrative. Let's go on with a few more. Unfavorables. Biden, 58%. Trump, 59%. As people have been saying recently in the last couple of days, you playing in our faces. Come on, Larry, you've been saying it. I've been saying it. People saying, you want people to withdraw from the race. Who you want to withdraw from the race? 70% said Biden should withdraw. This is a poll, though, which tells you what? It's knowledge by opinion, and it's one poll. They've been desperately trying to find other polls to surround this drumbeat, because it's a narrative. Narrative, not with a K. Silent a not. Narrative. What about Trump withdrawing? 57% said we want him to withdraw. Uh-oh. Keep running. 28% said, asked about Biden, said 28% said keep running. For Trump, lot higher, 41%. By the way, I looked at the people polled, Republican, Democrat, income, region. 40% of the people polled were from the South. Y'all gonna stop playing in our faces, at least for this couple of hours we could get on Saturday mornings. All right, here we go. Couple other things. Then they polled not only Biden, Trump, 3 names were introduced on the question of whether or not they be good candidate or not good. What are the 3 names? Vice President Kamala Harris, not Kamala. White supremacists who intentionally mispronounced their name. Not people who did it, who have done it occasionally like me, because there are places in the world where Kamala would be pronounced Kamala. Remember? Like Wayne Fonts, who used to be the coach of the Detroit Lions football team. I think he coached in the Washington professional football team for a while too. Wayne Fonts, that's anglicized. He was Latina, so you could say Wayne Fontes, but not you got to. So I don't know whether, there are places in the world where Kamala would be Kamala or Kamala would be Kamala. So I'm not talking about that unintentional. I'm talking about y'all who do it on purpose. Chris Sununu, the governor of New Hampshire, got slapped around on that. Oh, did I? What's her name? That's a lie. Either that or you're stupid. Those are the 2 choices. Anyway, they poll who would be a good candidate, who would not be a good candidate. After dealing with Biden, and Trump, Biden and Trump, they asked the question. They didn't ask about Shapiro or J.P. Pritzker. Guess they asked about. They didn't ask about any of these names. There was 2 names they asked, and I think everybody in here can guess what those 3 names were. Number 1 was the Vice President of the United States. 30% said she'd be a good candidate. 49% said not good. It should tell you. You polling people who you know what the answer going to be. Or let's not go conspiracy on it. Let's just say you're polling honestly. 40% in the South? I didn't know 40% of the people lived in the South. Come on now. The next name, y'all already know what the other 2 names were. The governor of California and the governor of Michigan. Y'all going to stop playing in our faces. We're missing the point. Gavin Newsom. 17% said he'd be good. 31% said not good. And then Gretchen Whitmer, Big Gretch, 15% said she would be good. 21% said not good. Irrelevant, those questions. You only ask that question because you anticipating something that might happen or may not happen. This whole world might change by the time we finish up in a few minutes. At least the political world of the United States in terms of electoral politics. But let's be very clear. We are not talking about knowledge by fact or knowledge by reason. We're talking about knowledge by opinion. And that opinion is being driven by a small sliver of a small class who just determined that they're going to lord it over everybody else, which was why her politics notwithstanding. Remember last week it was reported that the Democratic Socialists of America withdrew their endorsement of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez over the issue of Israel and Palestine. So for all the people, she's a socialist. She's a socialist. The DSA withdrew their endorsement, friends. This ain't even about her politics or not. Let's set that aside. What she walked through in that about an hour video, just show me how you're going to do it. Show me how you're going to replace them on the ballot. You can't. She said the lawyers had no answer. Show me how you're going to transfer the campaign war chest. The $100 million or more that's saved up behind Biden-Harris cannot be transferred, friends, to another candidate. What you gonna do? The lawyers, they sound like Tim Scott. Wow, you can't do it. Then she says, so you can't transfer the money. You can't get him off the ballot. And if you quit today and put the vice president in, you can't get a vice presidential candidate nominated. What is your agenda? Silence. She said, people, I'm not here to convince you that Joe Biden is the best. The debate sucked. Biden wasn't his best. Trump sucked. I'm not here to convince you that he shouldn't be replaced. I'm just asking you, if you're going to do it, what's the plan? Silence. I'll be damned if I'm going to listen to an actor. I'll be damned if I'm going to listen to Nancy Pelosi, who addresses everything as Speaker Emerita. Hakeem Jeffries, New York Times, he went to the White House and told him he got to go. Hakeem Jeffries on there yesterday. I did not say that I am behind Joe Biden, because you understand that as we look at him, we understand that we are with the, okay. Hakeem said, I don't want that. Why? Yeah, you should probably see who's running the place. And meanwhile, the man, you know, everybody loves, let me go here again, the same narrative. Saturday, it's all easing up now. They ain't got no place because they running out of space, right? It says inside the fight to keep Biden atop the ticket, the 12-day campaign is undercut by fumbles. Nothing President Biden seemed to work. He delivered an angry, defensive rant on MSNBC's Morning Joe. He showed foreign policy chops at a news conference. He wrote a long letter to fellow mind you now, he had that NATO conference last Friday, right? We talked about that last Friday. Performed, acquitted himself. Now they turned it into one sentence. He showed foreign policy chops at a news conference. Y'all ain't satisfied. You done hung everything on an hour and a half against a ranting, lying-ass, rapist, convicted felon madman. You done hung everything on that. Not a word about him. And then he stands for an hour, unscripted answers, even taking more questions than he was going to take. And he on the road campaigning. Where this fool been, the other one? But oh, the narrative. He says he wrote a long letter to fellow Democrats demanding an end to the calls for him to step aside. He confronted lawmakers on a Zoom call that evolved into a tense, heated exchange about his age and mental competency. 12 days ago, the president and his closest family members and advisors went on the offensive, determined to end what had already been nearly 2 weeks of hand-wringing over his listless performance at a debate on June 27. All them black women that signed that letter, the thousands that went out late this week, were they wringing their hands? They wringing their hands at you donor class and these politicos who they own, who are backing up, and them people in swing states who Chairman Pelosi has told do what you need to do to survive, which is now bled onto the Senate level. Shout out to Sherrod Brown in Ohio. The result was a flurry of interviews, rallies, defiant meetings with his closest allies, and impromptu campaign stops, all intended to rebut the premise that it was too old and frail to win a second term. They go on. But this is the New York Times, which has never had credibility. I read the New York Times because that's the paper that a lot of people read, just like the Financial Times. And it gives me enough to go on as a point of departure when read with everything else, from looking at stuff like France 24 to the South African press to the independent press, whether it be the Gleaner in Jamaica. The Jamaican papers are going all the way around the world to the various websites, not to mention the websites run by people who have no stake in this except our common humanity. By the way, this is also here. This is how credible the New York Times goes. See this? Musk goes from Trump skeptic to true believer. He was never a Trump skeptic. Milwaukee, a little over 2 months ago, Elon Musk found himself at Montsorel, the palatial Palm Beach compound of Nelson Peltz, the famed activist investor. Mr. Musk knew the sprawling grounds well, having stayed in the guest house. The conversation was a bit different than usual, though. Mr. Peltz had gathered a group of billionaire conservative financiers, including Steve Wynn, the Las Vegas casino magnate. Those of you who've given your money to Steve Wynn over the years, you're probably familiar with that. And the hedge funder, John Paulson, to discuss whether Republicans could seize Senate control, as well as the party's weak ground game, according to a person with direct knowledge of what transpired. Bill Maher is crazy, but last night he had Pete Buttigieg on the way back here. I was reading, and then I paused for a minute to check out who his guest was, and it was Pete Buttigieg. Buttigieg said of J.D. Vance, I know J.D. Vance. We both from the Midwest. He said, I went to school with, I see guys like J.D. Vance all the time. J.D. Vance going to say whatever it takes for him to get in power. So Maher was like, well, what do they want? Well, yeah. Pete Buttigieg gave a version. Buttigieg is on this list too, apparently, of replacements. Buttigieg said, this is what these tech billionaires want. You know what they want? They want a party that's going to let them do whatever they want. So they're not worried about your health care or education. They're not worried about your student loan forgiveness. They're not worried about your right to control your body. They're worried about, can I make some more money? Zuckerberg, Zuck worried about buying a glass company so he can look in your face and have that in his database, friends. He don't give a damn. Because guess what? If somebody he gets pregnant need to terminate a pregnancy, that's what they got jets for and private islands and doctors. But you, yeah, whatever. Give a damn about you. You know? His social network is him and his friends. It continues and says, but Mr. Musk had a darker message that spring day. He told the group that this would be the last free election in America because if President Biden won, millions of undocumented immigrants would be legalized and democracy would be finished, according to the person. Mr. Trump had to win, Mr. Musk said. Now, mind you, 2 months ago, they reported, Musk is on the fence. Now, as if they didn't know before, ding, ding, let's put it on the front page. The shit we knew all along goes on. He says, Mr. Trump had to win. Mr. Musk said he dispensed some advice for the veteran financiers who had decades more experience in Republican politics than he did. Their emphasis on political advertising was misplaced, he said. Tesla, his electric car company, barely advertises, he said, but had still built a cult following through word of mouth. Y'all know how that works. Yeah. A battery company that happens to have the battery in something on 4 wheels should be catching on fire, but that ain't the point. It's about the precious minerals, friend. Don't miss the point of Tesla. Don't miss the point of Tesla. Elon Musk this week in the papers, in the news, saying, oh, I don't like, in California, they just passed a law on same gender people. I'm against it. On gender, I'm against this question of normalizing these definitions of gender. So I'm going to move SpaceX headquarters to Texas. Yeah, that same Texas that Dr. Jessica Judeau is talking about, we were illegal, where she says, if I finish that introduction here, she says, it's all about narratives. How you write the narrative. Whether it be the date on a calendar or a story of a state that you still love for some reason because you was brought up there, that you done said people don't give a damn about except for their own personal interests and what they think those interests are. And those interests are shaped by narratives. Musk don't like this, so he gonna move to Texas. As if that's gonna save his ass. Their emphasis was on political advertising was misplaced, he said. Tesla, his electric car company, barely advertises, he said, but it still built a cult following through word of mouth. Why couldn't Republicans do the same? The most important thing that the financiers could do, Mr. Musk said, was ask 2 people to support Mr. Trump and urge them to ask 2 more. 2 people by 2 people. That's how the former president would win. You tell 2 friends and they'll tell 2 friends, and so on and so on and so on. Some of y'all old enough to remember that cartoon. In today's Financial Times, you see that there is a real split among the big money people. In fact, here we are. Let me see, can I find it quickly? Has Silicon Valley gone MAGA? Some of the wealthiest and most powerful tech investors in the U.S. are backing Donald Trump's reelection campaign, but most top executives at the biggest firms are staying silent for now. We arguing about potential replacements for Joe Biden when Ocasio-Cortez has asked the lawyers, how y'all gonna do it? And nobody has an answer because the answer is you can't. And the money people, the big money people, are all about, oh yeah, Peter Thiel. Isn't Peter Thiel part of the LGBTQIA plus community? This is like Alice in Wonderland. Ken wrote that in the Nubia chat. Let me ask you, Ken, what Pete Buttigieg said last night, because what's his name? Bill Maher asked him that question. He said, but I thought Peter Thiel was gay. Buttigieg looked at him, laughed, and said, look, man, this ain't got nothing to do with that. Thiel's job, and of course, J.D. Vance used to work for Peter Thiel. J.D. Vance's wife is caught up in that world. They got plenty of money, friends. The white nationalists with the cloth over their ear at the Republican National Committee, once J.D. Vance walked out there with his Indian wife, they was like, oh, swallow it. Because your narrative, you kind of messing with your mind. Buttigieg was like, this is not about identity. This isn't about culture. This is about he's rich and he wants to stay rich and he wants a party in place that's going to help him stay rich. Because guess what? There is no punishment in a racist, sexist society for Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel operates at a level beyond somebody stopping him because he's gay. If they're going to say something about it, they're going to say it under their breath as they play around and make another order on PayPal, even though he don't own it no more. The point is that this is about something else. What happens when the point is missed? So who knows how this session we have now will age? It may age. It's going to age interestingly over the next few hours, days, because the closer we get to August the 1st, the harder it is to replace Joe Biden. But perhaps it is already impossible to replace him, friends. Perhaps it's already impossible to replace him, because we're missing the point arguing about who will be better, who's got the best hair. They don't like black people. It's clear they don't want Kamala Harris because Madam Speaker Emeritus is trying to get around, because it ain't J.B. Pritzker, friends. It's not the governor of Michigan or Pennsylvania that she wants. It's her friend Gavin Newsom. When you see another wholly owned subsidiary of Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff, say it's time to go, listen, have I heard Nancy Pelosi say that out of her mouth? No, she ain't going to say that. Have we heard Barack Obama say that out of his mouth? No, we haven't heard that out of his mouth. In fact, we haven't heard anything from the president of the United States. I mean, you know, George Clooney let it slip out his mouth that he showed Obama what he was going to write. And Obama said, just wait until, you know, after NATO leaves, because we can't afford. Okay, so you did say something. You were saying you said nothing publicly. Okay. let's just go with what we know. We ain't got to go with conjecture, friends. So while that's happening, you got a whole ass white supremacy convention in Milwaukee. Headline like WWE wrestling, none of it real. And if you missed the point, you got everybody from Linda McMahon to damn Hulk Hogan leading into Trump's rant. The longest nomination speech in the history of recorded history of political conventions in this country, which topped 2020, which topped 2016, because before that, the longest two were him. With American Carnage, his inauguration speech of January 2017, it's dead in the middle. And now the New York Times, it's July, when we're having this conversation, July 20th, 2024. We've established that those dates are arbitrary, those numbers are arbitrary, but that dates themselves allow people to convene some sense of governance formations in the social structure. That's what dates are for. Well, the New York Times has floated another date today. They say that perhaps the deadline for Biden to get out will be after Wednesday. Well, what happens Wednesday? New York Times said, BB, the mass murderer. Murder is the case that the ICJ gave him. BB is going to speak to Congress on Wednesday. And the New York Times now conjecture, saying that, well, perhaps Biden's team doesn't want him to withdraw before that because it would look like it gave Netanyahu a victory. Last I checked, maybe Netanyahu can't vote in the U.S. elections. But it doesn't matter because the Christian soldiers are on a roll. And all this fire toward the Democrats. Meanwhile, the Republicans run around here pure, whole ass Ku Klux Klan. No matter the Clayton Bigbies of the party. You understand? Out here with their sheets. Wow! In that process, we will miss the point. Joe Biden is supposed to be, if he has recovered enough, in Austin, Texas on Wednesday at the Lyndon Baines Johnson Library to mark a delayed marking of the occasion of the signing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So this is a battle, as we kind of wind to a close today. It's a battle in an idiocy, in an idiocracy over narratives, over storylines. Ocasio-Cortez asks these very simple questions. Can't transfer the money. The ballot challenges is going to keep anything. You can't get a vice president through. I'm just asking y'all questions. Nobody have an answer to me. So let me go and tell the people. She said, set aside my politics, your beliefs, whatever. I'm just telling you what I am hearing. I'm not in any room where then it told me the playbook. I'm just going to share this with you, the rooms I've been in, what I've asked and have gotten no answers to. And it says more than finally about the observers who are caught up in this mess than it does about anything else. The book that I mentioned in Nubia Monday night I started reading it as well. This is Emily Nussbaum's book, Cue the Sun, The Invention of Reality TV. And what she's doing in here is helping us understand how we came to be a society of observers who are in the line of fire, but we much rather argue about reality TV. And that's how reality television started. A wholly owned subsidiary of reality television. And now we're a wholly owned damn subsidiary because you messed around and voted for him to be president. We didn't, but well, some of us may have in here. And if you come in Sunday, maybe come in Monday night office hours, we need to have a conversation about this. Why? Because, one of the things that I refrain from, and me and Lamont refrained from when we had that small, brief conversation with Dionne Warwick a couple of weeks ago on Sirius, was asking her about Celebrity Apprentice. Because remember, she was on the Celebrity Apprentice. Would have loved to have done that. Get a chance, I'm going to ask her about that at some point. Hopefully there'll still be a country to ask her about, because Trump get back in between Project 2025 and Agenda 47. He may shut down all the damn radio and TV stations, because John Boy Robertson told him if the president does it, it ain't illegal. Watch the executive orders that are going to come out. Oh, by the way, those of you who might want to stock up on these abortion pills, you might want to do that because Trump gets back in. They're going to tell the Food and Drug Administration to reclassify those pills as controlled substances, and they're not going to be able to be distributed. You won't be able to get any of them online or anywhere else. The nationwide abortion ban is coming, friends, if that's an issue you're concerned about. If not, we can move on to something else. But at any rate, what we can't look to in terms of observers is this mythical, again, this narrative, funky ass settler colony narrative of who's important and who's not in this context. I was also, the great Wilson Moses, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, made transition in Pennsylvania. This was his last book, and I've had it on the shelf, but I hadn't cracked it, and he made transition. So I'm still sad about this. He wrote this in 2019. It's called Thomas Jefferson, A Modern Prometheus. Wasn't Jeremiah Moses one of our best intellectual historians? Golden Age of Black Nationalism, Alexander Crummell, A Study of Civilization and Discontent, one of my favorites of his. Uncle Tom's and Messiah's collection of his essays. Afrotopia, which I didn't completely agree with in terms of its characterization of African-centered intellectuals in the 19th century. But the beautiful thing about it is we ain't got to agree. He was at the top list of scholars. When the one time I got to sit with him, ironically, in terms of serendipity of how this works, in the year 2000, I was with my then boss, Dr. Cassandra Watson Jones, at the School of Philadelphia. We were headed to Penn State for a meeting. That's when I found out about the Carnegie units. She sent me to go do the research on these Carnegie units. And I went out there with her because, I was her assistant and I was happy to go, but also because I would have the afternoon free. And I had one objective in mind, and that was to go find Wilson Jeremiah Moses, because John Henry Clark had always said to me, I had recently finished my dissertation. That was actually 1999. It wasn't 2000. It was 1999. And he said, I respect Wilson Moses. I like Wilson Moses. He's a hell of a scholar. He's done a lot, had a lot of insight. This is before he actually, was it 99? Afrotopia may have just come out, because my dissertation covers a lot of the same ground, but it has a different set of conclusions. So I took a copy of my, 500-page dissertation to Penn State, put it in my bag. After the morning meetings, he said, okay, you release. Okay, I'm going to find Wilson Moses. Went to the history department. He was sitting in his office. I dumped that thing in his lap. Said, John Clark told me I had to come see you. He said, I like Professor Clark. I have a lot of respect for him. See, people who think like this is, people that have different opposing visions, no. And he sat there and read my dissertation, not the whole thing. He still had it, of course, but I left it with him, but he went through pages. He went through the basic structure. He asked me to make my argument. He said, okay, it's interesting. And we went through and we had a conversation for several hours sitting there. I was not on his schedule. But anyway, Wilson Moses, this was his last book, Thomas Jefferson, A Modern Prometheus. I said, why is he writing about that? I got it, and it made sense to me. His use of Prometheus, he says he's using Prometheus as a trickster figure. So basically, you could almost say a modern trickster is what Thomas Jefferson is saying in this book. And I'm not going to go through the premise of it. It's a very interesting text. Again, this is not the kind of reading you have to. I agree, Victor. I agree, Ope. A woman's body is her business, not some religious potentate. Well, guess what? Donald Trump don't think it's a woman's business. He ain't talking about pregnancies. He's talking about the right to violate women. People say, well, why would you say that? I would say that because he's on record saying it himself. Forget abortions. Forget terminating pregnancies. I'm talking about the violation of women straight up. And at least according to John Roberts, in his official duty, he can do a lot of that stuff. And can't nobody question it. Sonia Sotomayor tried to tell us. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about the thesis of this. It's very intriguing because the guy's a meticulous scholar. In fact, this book is exactly 500 pages. But at the end of the preface, at the end of the preface, he says this. He says, Jefferson was capable of reverse snobbery and anti-intellectualism, as he showed in the following sentences to his nephew, Peter Carr. My fan says probably escaped off the Carr plantation, these cars. He says, state a moral case to a plowman and a professor. So state a moral case to a plowman, a farmer, and a professor. Jefferson writes, the former, the plowman, will decide it as well and often better than the latter, because he has not been led astray by artificial rules. Wilson Moses goes on to write, this seeming genuflection before folk wisdom was one of the many examples of Jeffersonian hyperbole, for his communications with plowmen were neither frequent nor familiar. His attitude toward bourgeois artisans was contemptuous. In other words, writers for the New York Times today. And his dealings with professors could be impatient and dismissive. Jefferson designed schools based on the classical trivium, a system for raking the best from the rubbish. The rubbish would be all the rest of the white people, not even considering us. Jefferson, he goes on, while training the rest to be content with their condition of life. So what Wilson Moses is saying, this modern trickster, this modern Prometheus, the guy had contempt for y'all, everybody in this conversation. In fact, we weren't even human, except when it came time to get in the bed, huh, chief, master of the mountain. Read Henry Wisick's book on Thomas Jefferson. But I'm into this, right? And that's when the thing hit me. This is what he says in the last paragraph. He says, if the age of Jefferson were truly an age of democratic revolution, perhaps its representative man should not be a landed aristocrat, but a small tradesman, like the Boston shoemaker John Robert Twelves Hughes, someone from that class of artificers that Jefferson disparaged as panderers of vice and a threat to Republican virtue. Unlike Jefferson, Hughes actually fought in the American Revolution, slightly older, but still outlasting Jefferson by 14 years. He lived to see the arrival of railway transportation, photography, electric communications, modern commerce, and the impending industrial capitalism. Unlike Jefferson, Hughes lived out his life among the people of the city, which allowed him to witness the coming of a newer, if still imperfect, democracy. As historian Alfred Young has famously shown, here's the money. But neither man could have foreseen the economic, technological, and moral issues that confront us today. And we cannot rely on their generation for guidance. Pause here. I'm going to read the last sentence in a minute, but I want to put a footnote here. That's Sam Alito. That's Clarence Thomas, who would have had his ass with a shirt off somewhere in a field in South Carolina if he went back to the founding fathers. You fool, you dupe. This is Byron Donalds. This is, in fact, let me see if I have the cover. Do I? Yeah. Here's the cover of this week's New Yorker, friends. You see the cover of this week's New Yorker? Huh. They playing in our faces. Let's go back to the 19th century. What did the founders say? What was the rule said? Wilson Moses concludes with this last sentence. He says, the realities of the present age are such that neither the Prometheans who kindled the fires of the American Revolution, the tricksters in other words, nor the proletarians who fueled them, that would be the people with the white cloth on there, that's who they descended from, white cloth on their ear at the convention, the proletarians. Neither the Prometheans or the proletarians can offer our generation much enlightenment in the darkness that threatens. They want to go to original intent when it means the good old days. You remember, oh, I wish I were in the land of cotton. Old times there are not forgotten. J.D. Vance's Hillbillies, elegy or not, we're not in this country. Hulk Hogan, let's go real Americans. Yeah, your people weren't here either. They had drugged my people here in chains. And for those who think blackface nativism is somehow a path to liberation, please understand that blackface nativism will end up making you sound and look like Clarence Thomas and Byron Donalds. These people want you one place and one place only, under their feet. And in that class of people who crave power over anything else, they're willing to do whatever they need to do to keep it. Joe Biden losing an election doesn't bother them. That means in 28, they can run Gavin Newsom. They can run Gretchen Whitmer. They can run. And by then, of course, we be getting our asses kicked so tight that it may not even be a country, but they're willing to take that risk because the money will keep flowing. Musk and them don't believe in a flag. And Peter Thiel and all the rest of these billionaires, including the ethno-nationalists who have money, who will support Israel over everything all the time, which would include Musk, which is why he's coming here, Bibi Netanyahu, killing people by the thousands to speak in your United States Congress. You want to be a nativist? Be a nativist about that. But let's be very clear. None of these borders we call countries matter to the people for whom power is the concern. We are missing the point if we think this is a domestic challenge. So the RNC cued the sun last week. A sliver of the Democratic Party, the predator class, is trying to figure out how they can keep their power and influence and money, and shoving out somebody who they knew was a mummy 4 years ago when they cleared the field for him, and knew he was a mummy a year ago when Ocasio-Cortez said we should have had this debate a year ago. Even 8 months ago would have been different. We went through all these primaries. You're going to wait till 5 minutes before the damn thing breaks to say you got to go? What the hell is the point? What's the point? They don't have an answer. Yeah, because we missing the point. The point is power. Tammy Sawyer in Memphis, running there in Memphis. If you haven't early voted, go in there and pull for Commissioner Sawyer, our young sister. Tammy Sawyer said this on Sirius on Wednesday to me and Lamont. Tammy said, I'm in the Democratic Party because I ain't no choice. I'm not in here because I'm rah-rah cheering for these people. I'm in here because it's a matter of self-defense. It's a matter of protection. Democrat, Republican, not the issue. Our protection is the issue. This is the place that affords me the best tools to be able to protect us. So please understand, when the smoke clears, will there be an obituary? Will there be a post-mortem? Will there be a redemption tale? Will there be a revenge tour? That's in our hands. So that's it for this week. I'll mention a couple of things, though. I want to mention just by way of passing. It was in yesterday's New York Times. Let me see if I left that in the bag when I pulled out the Financial Times. If I did, oh, come on, son. I hope I did. Yeah, here it is. It's very important. I want to mention this because the great Robert Allen, one of the co-founders of the Black Scholar magazine, wrote a book called The Port Chicago 50. Port Chicago in California, of course, was a port in California where African people in the military were loading munitions when an explosion led to their deaths. In fact, yesterday, here we are. Navy exonerates black men convicted in 1944. On July 17, 1944, hundreds of sailors were loading ammunition onto 2 cargo ships in Port Chicago, California, not far from San Francisco, when an explosion powerful enough to be felt 50 miles away killed 320 of the men, most of them black. More than 400 sailors were injured in the blast, the cause of which has never been fully determined. When ordered to continue loading ammunition the next day, 258 black sailors objected until safety conditions improved. All of them were subjected to a sham trial and convicted of various offenses, though most of them eventually agreed to return to work at the piers. The situation was so bereft of justice that Thurgood Marshall, who was a lawyer then for the NAACP and would later become a Supreme Court justice, attempted to intervene on their behalf. The group of 50 men who continued to resist were given dishonorable discharges and jail sentences. They became known as the Port Chicago 50. And their case was used as a driver in the early days of the civil rights movement nationwide and helped lead the desegregation of the armed forces. I just want to mention in passing that when I came of age, by the time I got to undergrad and in graduate school, we heard about Port Chicago reading in the pages of the Black Scholar and in the conversations black folk had in our governance formation in the black nationalist community. There were those who swore that what happened was they tested a small nuclear device out there. Now, and people gave their pros and cons for that. There was writings about the Port Chicago mutiny. But what is without controversy is whatever exploded out there, that they've never determined what the source was or they've never revealed it. There's no public revelation of that. Thank you for putting that in the chat. Because Robert Allen wrote a book about the Port Chicago mutiny. Whatever happened in the aftermath, them brothers like, I'm not going back down there. You done erased all our people by the hundreds and the shit blew up and there's no pier left. I'm not going back down there. Continuing. They became known as the Port Chicago 50, and their case was used as a driver in the early days of the civil rights movement nationwide and helped lead to the desegregation of the armed forces on Wednesday. This last Wednesday. 80 years after the explosion at Port Chicago, the Navy Secretary, Carlos del Toro, officially exonerated all 258 black sailors, none of whom are still alive. Quote, today, the U.S. Navy is righting a historical wrong, President Biden said in a statement after the announcement. No, you're not. Here's how you would right a historical wrong. You transport yourself to 1944, bring every one of them Africans the day before the explosion to today and say, you are alive, you are healthy, we're sorry. Here's all the money we owe you anyway for you and your families for what might have happened the day before had we gone back. In other words, it'd be science fiction. You're congratulating yourself for what you did to these brothers. Ain't none of them alive. I'm not going to read the rest of it except I'm going to go to the last paragraph. The exoneration came a week too late. A week too late for Robert L. Allen, an emeritus professor of ethnic studies and African American studies at the University of California, Berkeley, who interviewed scores of survivors for a book about the disaster that was published in 1989. Shout out to the great Robert Allen. I'm looking over there, a couple of Robert Allen's books that I keep very close. He was the author of Black Awakening and Capitalist America. Those of you who know the name Robert Allen, I'm looking at it over there. Anyway. Also a guide to Black Power in America. That book's harder to find. Black Awakening in Capitalist America, you can get your hands on. If you rush, you might be able to find someone out there, a used copy of A Guide to Black Power in America. I'm going to resist the urge to go up on that shelf over there. It's too high anyway and get it. for me to get it quickly. But the exoneration came a week too late for him. Mr. Allen died on July 10th, according to Yulee Padmore, the executive director of the Port Chicago Alliance, which will hold a commemoration of the disaster's 80th anniversary this weekend. If those of you in the chat, either in Nubia or in YouTube, if you know the information, please drop this in the chat. I haven't had a chance to look at it. There's a commemoration this weekend for the Port Chicago incident. Robert was aware that the Secretary of the Navy was coming and that it was likely he was bringing good news, but we didn't know for sure. The Reverend Diana McDaniel, a close friend and colleague of Mr. Allen, said in an email. We do this work because we are redeeming our ancestors. We do this work because we must stand for the truth, not opinion, not faith, but fact. And it can inform opinion and faith. It should inform opinion and faith. Some passings. We all know now, we got the news not even 24 hours ago that Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee made transition, as you heard Professor Hunter, you say, native of Queens, New York. Grandparents came from Jamaica. Mother, of course, was a nurse for many years, made transition fairly recently herself, 2010, a graduate of Oakwood College. For those of you who might not know this, her father was a cartoonist, in fact. Let me see if I can find it quickly. Let me see if I can find Ezra Jackson very quickly in here, because I did have a copy of this, and Urias, you'll appreciate this, brother. Ezra Jackson, let me see, page 174. This is the recently published book, Invisible Men, the Trailblazing Black Artists of comic books. Ken Quattro's book, we've talked about it before. There's Sheila Jackson Lee's father right there with his hair. Ezra Clyde Jackson, A Tale of Two Students. Ezra Clyde Jackson's people that come from Jamaica. Mind you, it was Sheila Jackson Lee that took up the bloodstained banner of pushing for H.R. 40, the reparations bill. So the folks who talk about the black nativists in particular who say, well, you're not from here. Sheila Jackson Lee's people weren't from here. Actually, they were from here. What's that? The earth. Anyway, there's a long history of him being a penciler, an inker, and then he got out of the game for a while, but I don't think they have a picture of it here. And my copies, I think I must have taken them to storage. He then started writing for the Golden Legacy comic book. We talked about Golden Legacy. I showed you all the one. His artwork is most prominently featured in Golden Legacy #3. That's the comic book on Crispus Attucks. So that was Sheila Jackson Lee's mother. She joins them now in ancestral repose. Bernice Johnson Reagan. Maybe we'll talk about her Monday night. I mentioned it last week, but last Monday, I think. But maybe next week I'll talk more about the life and work of the great Bernice Johnson Reagan. Bernice Johnson Reagan out of Albany, Georgia, one of the founders of the original SNCC Singers, the Freedom Singers, who then who was part of the Harambe Singers, coming out of that, Harambe being Kiswahili for freedom. And then the anchor, the founder, the center, Dr. Johnson, who took her PhD in a form of African diaspora and folk history, who crafted the vision for what became the Smithsonian Folk Life Festival here in Washington, D.C., who moved to D.C. along with so many other SNCC folk, from Miriam Berry and my man Frank Smith, who started and runs the Civil War Museum, to Joyce and Dory Ladner, and so many others who came to this area. She then went on to found one of the great cultural meaning-making groups and conveyors of movement and memory in the 20th and 21st century. And of course, that would be the group Sweet Honey in the Rock. Bernice Johnson Reagan made transition last week. Of course, we saw Joe Jellybean Bryant, of course, Kobe Bryant's father, made transition. Happy birthday yesterday, 102, to the great Rachel Robinson. Jackie Robinson's wife, Sharon David Robinson's mother, still swinging strong. Also, we talked about this on the air yesterday. The great Martha Reeves, of course, Martha Reeves and the Vandellas. We passed her birthday, and Ron Walters' birthday is today. That's what I'll end. The great Ron Walters, Dr. Ron Walters, who we talked about many times. If you have access to the History Maker database, our brother, even as they named a street for Joe Madison in his hometown, meaning Larry Crow, the mayor of Dayton, who Larry knows, a little bit younger, who they grew up in the same circles. announced that Joe Madison has a street name for him in Dayton that we'll all be seeing when we go to the Martin Delaney ritual. We'll take pictures, but I know the Nubians are going to do that before. And please post it when you do. But I mentioned Larry because Bernice Johnson Reagan, Martha Reeves, and Ron Walters are in the History Makers database. And guess who interviewed them? Kwaku Larry Crow. So if you have a chance to hear those interviews, please do. So off with that,
Ashe. And let's, Dr. Carr, thank you for all of that, because I forgot to mention Joe Madison Way on my show yesterday, because it was Foolishness Friday, and I'm just
no, it'll keep because they still got to put the sign up. So
and to have the legacy of Shauna Renee, Joe Madison's daughter, on Mondays on Urban View Mornings at 7 a.m. Follows her dad's classics. It's let me come back in. The power of being able to construct the world as it should be.
Yes.
And I don't take that lightly, because I'm in a house that I don't own, but I'm able, most of us live in houses that we don't own.
That's exactly right.
At any point in time, they can call your mortgage. If you don't have the money, they can own your house. But but it's still our responsibility to do some things. Just because you don't own the house, you don't have a deed to it. You rearrange that furniture. You have to, and even if it's not permanent, because they can always put it back to the way they think it should be. You've left your mark. And, I think about that. Even Sheila Jackson Lee was running for office, was working, even though she had one of the most debilitating types of cancer you could have. That leaves your body racked, because I know so many people that died of that same illness. It is horrific, but she kept running. She put her name in the hat in March, knowing that she was battling this. So, one would argue maybe you should step down, but you keep working until you can't anymore, because it's too important to not.
That's right.
So
it's so funny. It's so funny people say that, because shout out to Daryl Green, our producer sitting here in DC. He reminded us, and I can't tell you, Prof, how beautiful it is to be in not only the Black Eagle studio, but with his people, because then we get to all these stories. And one thing Daryl said yesterday, Joe Madison would say, "I'm not passing the torch. I'll light your torch with my fire." So, I mean, when I think about somebody like young Jasmine Crockett, of course, with Eddie Bernice Johnson, I mean, some warriors stay on the field until the very end, but there's going to be somebody to pick up Sheila Jackson Lee. I mean, she's legendary, for being tough on her staff, but she's got these people who have been toughened. In fact, we saw it last night at the concert. Dionne Warwick's son singing the duet, and she told him, "You take the last line." And he took it all the way up and down. And then she said, She said, "But you can do better." And she made him sing it again.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. I'm telling you.
I love that.
I'm talking about straight teaching. And then the grandbaby came out and they sang it again. And she said, "Well, everybody's singing." And she said, "It's the same 40 people singing. Y'all can do better." And she made us do all sing it again. I mean, look, just because people are hard, it doesn't mean they don't love our people. Sometimes them people who love us the most.
Come on.
And it's a tough season. We'll talk about this on Monday. In Nubia for Nubians, there's a sister, a Nubian, Sister Sandra. Her brother made transition unexpectedly. And so, we'll raise her in that space where, it's our community in a different way, because we know that there are tough things now. Yeah. And yes, Regan is how she said her name, Bernice Johnson Regan. Thank you for reminding me in the chat, because even when I was with her on occasion, she was very gracious. She wouldn't correct you, but yes, Bernice Johnson Regan. Thank you.
I also want to uplift the name of a woman who I spent my whole childhood. Her mama used to babysit me. She made transition and she was memorialized yesterday. Dolores Coker Bradley, tennis player, school teacher, guidance counselor, and one of the best Scrabble players. She would come to my house and play Scrabble with my daddy. And then I took up that mantle, and he and I would play every Sunday. But first, Miss D would be at my house playing with my father Scrabble, because he loved to play Scrabble and all kinds of games, and couldn't find too many people who were competitive. But that lady had regal and dignified, and it's we're losing a lot
people. You know what? Somebody said it the other day. That means what? What does it mean?
That means we have to step it up.
No question.
Shoot.
No question.
Step it up, because we're losing giants. We're losing people that paved the way, that laid the foundation. We have to step it up.
Yeah,
so.
we do. Yeah, we do.
Yes,
We have to step it up. We have to step it up, and we will. We will.
we
But
will.
next week, maybe we'll talk a little bit. I didn't mention Eileen Cannon, that absurd judgment she made in Florida trying to help her friend Trump, who put her on one of the last acts he did as president. But we'll talk about that maybe a little bit next, because it's going to get reversed.
Right after all of the executions of people between the time that he
Yes,
lost office and then
that's right.
Had the insurrection, preside over the insurrection. He also executed a bunch of people, which typically is not supposed to happen. That's, to me, a precursor of what could happen. Y'all playing.
Yes.
Don't play.
Please stop playing. Whatever political decision you make, that's your choice. But let it be an informed decision.
Please. In the name of Jesus. All right.
In the name. Come on now. Come on. Love you.
Love you too. Enjoy.
All right.
Your
Sunyata's tomorrow, right, in Nubia. So
yes. And we'll just end with her image.
Please do. Please.
I wish it was bigger, but that's what I could do quickly. All right.
Cool.
Love you, Dr. Carr.
Love you too, Professor Honey. Love everybody. See y'all later.
All right.